Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Stephen Faber has distrusted women since he was a child. His mother was to blame. His relationship with Camille was complicated and strained. The woman was known as demanding and intransigent to other people's shortcomings. Therefore, when in his youth he dropped out of college, his mother annoyingly showed him her contempt. For a whole year afterward, she nagged him and called him unemployed. Every day he heard the same phrase, "When will you get off my neck?" The last course left, and he didn't make it. A weakling. Life with such a woman was not pleasant. She couldn't accept her son's independence. So she put all the household chores on the boy's shoulders. But Stephen did not like to do household chores, and often under a plausible pretext to shirk the tedious work. In addition, she flooded him with criticism. Camille hated his long hair, which was shaved at the back of his head into a ponytail. She was infuriated by the careless style in Stephen's clothes. And most annoying of all was his nightlife, gambling online or going to the city's hot spots. But they weren't the guy's true hobbies. He simply found discharge in them when his mother had urgent business and she tightened her iron grip. Stephen enjoyed sitting at home, watching television, and reading books. Camille was a successful broker out of forking out decent money. Stephen, on the other hand, was wasting it. He was not wasteful, he just wanted to do everything to spite his mother. Since childhood, she considered her son a worthless person, worthless for nothing and weak character. Not once in her life did she consult with the boy growing up. The woman only told him how to live his life. But he was completely deaf to her moralizing, just did not allow the usurper to break his protective shell. It was a silent but stubborn protest. Sure, Stephen was used to the luxuries his mother surrounded herself with, but she did it out of pure selfishness, because everything in the house was arranged to her liking, and she was used to having her orders obeyed immediately. The mansion was 15 minutes from the city, near a small picturesque river surrounded by a coniferous forest. Stephen knew how to get aesthetic pleasure from communicating with nature, so he liked to walk around the neighborhood in the evenings. This habit was formed in his early childhood from the time when his father lived with them, and Stephen felt needed and loved. Even now, having become an adult and saying to himself the cherished word, his father, his soul, as if defending, becoming weak and receptive heart, warming the craving then and pleasant feeling of love and hope. Unlike Camille, his father Sam was the embodiment of the power of dignity and kindness. Many women looked up to him. You bet, such a specimen of enormous stature, majestic and muscular with a body in relief. He had lived and worked in the circus since he was a little boy. Such a monumental man dared not offend. He could not even get into a conflict situation that would make him angry. No one argued with him. This giant was a soft and kind dad. Next to him, Stephen felt protected, and he grew up with absolute fearlessness in his heart. He grew up very brave because his peers in kindergarten and at school looked up to his dad with subservience. They showed Stephen every respect and honor. His father's authority was unquestionable. It was worth people to look at him, and they immediately understood what real power is. Almost 10 years. Life with him suited Camille. Although there was no mutual understanding between the parents, they often quarreled and loudly clarified their relationship. The father did it calmly and dignified, and the mother theatrically and without. So it seemed to everyone a complete hysteric. Stephen did not understand at all what normal man could live with her mother. Her feisty temper could only be tolerated because of her amazing outer beauty. Camille in her youth was graceful and well-built. You could paint portraits of her face. A light blush was always colorful on the delicate pink aviator, the girls framing it, delicate blonde curls. Camille's eyes were big and bright blue. Her nose was small and her lovely lips had a beautiful shape and pleasant fullness. Camille was now in her 50s, but she remained an interesting woman, a friend. She always told me that she enjoyed the attention of men. This was the real truth. Indeed, after her father, she had had many suitors, who pecked not only at her physical attractiveness, but also at her financial solvency. Stephen was used to having strange men show up at their house and then disappear. He didn't even bother to memorize their names. All these men seemed to him to be just background to his life, and cheap and of poor quality, something small and insignificant, not worthy of attention. None of these living characters could compare to the image of his tragically departed father. His departure happened quite unexpectedly and broke the whole destiny of a 9-year-old boy. One day, Sam went on tour with the circus. They were quite successful. That year, it was a dry, hot summer, and for some unknown reason deep in the night, most of the circus group members died in a fire. The performers had saved money on a hotel, and so they slept in caravans. From one of them, the fire spread to the others, and the hot flames spared no one. Only 2 administrators returned to their hometown, who did not skimp to spend the night in the hotel at their own expense. That was that. One afternoon, Stephen was left alone. Yes, he lived with his mother, but her attitude to her son was rather cool. Therefore, after the death of his father, the boy could not find anywhere that blessed source of unconditional love, which accepts the whole person and forgives him imperfections. Stephen would have liked to remain an open, brave, and kind boy, but circumstances did not allow him. His mother demanded that he stop being a sissy, went all the way, and with others behaved harshly. And all the peers, who subserviently ingratiated to him during his father's lifetime, now became insolent and insolent. They had been taking revenge on Stephen for years for Sam's strength. They laughed, they called him names, they beat him. At first he tolerated it, but then he became embittered and defensive, and showed his classmates his rage all at once. He didn't have to be friends with anyone else, but they stopped touching the boy. There was a big scandal at school when he bit their hands like an animal. He was stigmatized at meetings and councils, but no one wanted to understand the true motives behind the child's behavior. No one ever recognized that he was beating his teeth into the hands that had repeatedly stabbed him. No one ever realized that it was an outburst of humiliated boyish ego. After this incident, Faber Jr. was enlisted in the category of vicious bullies, but he did not make excuses to anyone. It was to his advantage. Finally, his classmates would leave him alone, afraid to avoid him. As always, people bowed their heads to boldness and strength. Stephen liked being alone more and more. He consciously chose silence. The boy rejoiced when classes were over and ran home with pleasure. There he would immerse himself and enjoy the solitude. His mother was always late at work, but even if she came home early, she was rarely interested in her son's affairs. All her questions were superficial, and she never listened to the answers. Camille was fantastically engrossed in her life. In the evenings, she and her girlfriends liked to go to restaurants, have another glass of expensive champagne or dabble in brandy, then spend time with a man and leave for an all-nighter with her beau at a hotel, or bring the Playboy home. Stephen spent all his free time on the computer. All his friends were on the other side of the screen. He loved the confined space of his own home and never went out. Camille had told her son explicitly that she dreamed of him living an independent life. And now, after he had dropped out of training, her hopes of getting rid of her own child soon were dashed. So she decided to lock him up. And Camille methodically sued her son for lack of a job. She strongly disliked his friends and girlfriends, although there weren't many. In the end, she gave him an ultimatum to either go to work for her firm or move out of the house to earn his own bread. Stephen was stuck in the office for over 2 weeks undergoing training. His mother strictly monitored it herself, sorting out his gaps in knowledge, blunders, and mistakes in practice. However, to her surprise, the woman began to notice that her son was rapidly advancing in the profession, had a good sense, and developed analytical skills. She did not wonder where her eyes had been before and why she thought the boy was an Ulyss. The woman was accustomed to extract her own benefit from any situation, so she immediately put her son in a responsible position so that everything would look rank in the eyes of inspecting organizations and in front of employees. Camille bought her son a fake diploma, and he officially started working. If in this son began to suit her completely, now she clung to his personal life, demanded to get a permanent lady of the heart, said that she wanted grandchildren. Stephen wondered to himself why she would do that. She rarely sees her son, and she communicates through the lip. And here are grandchildren. Probably her friends have made their own. She's got nothing to brag about. Stephen introduced her to two girls from the office. He said that he was friends with these young ladies and that they worked for her. Camille met them for a long time, explaining that these pseudo ladies are not suitable for the role of his girlfriends at all. Stephen began to avoid such conversations, but his mother became more and more insistent every day. The boy was discouraged by her pressure and constantly invented excuses to run away from home. He could not tell his own mother that it was her example that had formed his disdain for women. He looked upon them only as objects for the fulfillment of his intimate needs. Stephen thought they were all mindless dolls. It did not even occur to him that girls could be interesting individuals. The prospect of a marriage relationship in general made him giddy and twitchy. He remembered for the rest of his life how his father suffered, how he wanted to be independent of his wife's whims. But his mother had blackmailed him, using her son's responsible attitude and guilt. The only things Stephen held dear in this world were professions and the personal freedom of a girl he did not cling to by means of charm, intelligence, or modesty. He paid attention only to physical data, evaluated the figure, height, breast size, curves of the body. The guy did not even imagine that such a lady would be with him constantly every minute, irritate him with her rank. He had set a boundary of socializing with women, right from his bed. They were headed out the door. Stephen loved solitude and did not tolerate even his mother's presence around him, and strangers were out of the question. But one had to know Camille to realize she would not stop until she got the desired result. It was not necessary to wait long, because she herself decisively organized a date for her son with the girl she liked. Stephen decided not to contradict his mother in order not to create a conflict situation. He agreed to this play. In the shower, of course. The guy was furious, or his mother's wave of rage. And how was it not to be indignant? This woman had given complete oblivion to his childhood years, and now brazenly invaded his private life. She's the right woman for you, Evelyn. Recently moved to our neighborhood, well-to-do parents, but she's so eager to live on her own. I found her a house a few days ago, not far from ours for rent. I've been in touch with her family. They're our equals. I've known her mother since I was a student. Emily was one of the nicest and most well-mannered girls at the Institute, and if Jenna's the name of the girl is anything like her mother, and I'm pretty sure you'll like her. Stephen was nervous about his upcoming meeting with this young lady and resented the match. There's no point in inviting her over. She'll be embarrassed. We'll talk on neutral territory, Camille suggested. It was her mother's decision. Stephen wondered very much how she had managed to let the situation out of her control. He sighed with relief and nodded in agreement. Jenna picked him up. The next evening, Stephen left the house. In a shallow glimpse of rain, he saw a silver open-top Chevy pull into the driveway. The car wasn't new, but it looked solid. A bright brunette with a boyish haircut jumped out. Leather jacket, dry red pants, and a turquoise scarf around her neck. What looked like cowboy boots and bright cherry lipstick. She slammed one hand on the hood. With the other, she dutifully obeyed. No, this girl was not cultured, quiet. Straight back, swift gait, confident look, pretty mouth and round aching chin. A graceful nose. Stephen felt a power emanating from this social lady. She gave him a firm hand and manfully squeezed his fingers in her palm. I suppose you know my name. She turned to Stephen. That's right. You do, he smiled. A sly expression appeared on Jenna's face. Well, I know all about you from Camille. Worthless, weak-willed, in need of constant attention and feminine care. That's how she characterized her own son. Stephen came closer to the girl, put his arms around her waist, and pressed her against him. My mother was so busy with herself that she didn't even notice how her son grew up, became a man without her participation. That's why the picture she has in her head doesn't match reality at all. Yeah, I'm a lone wolf. Yes, I'm a lone wolf. I'm not made for sentiment. But I know how to communicate with women, and you will have the opportunity to make sure of it. Laughing guy in the face of the command. The girl was not embarrassed and did not pull away. She calmly endured direct eye contact with him and even smirked slightly. When Stephen let go of Jenna, she walked around the car, leaned over to the control panel, and performed some simple manipulations. Immediately, the top of the car tilted up. But then let's get away from this house and into the wind, the girl suggested. Stephen opened the doors in front of her and then sat down in the comfortable chair next to her. That's a hell of a car you've got. How long has it been yours? Evelyn's been asking for about a year. My girl's a fire. And she got into a long conversation about battery valves and gasoline prices. What made Stephen realize he was a passionate car enthusiast? I've been having trouble with the open top, keeps coming down at the worst possible times, just like a pain in the ass. The girl continued her monologue. Before breaking down, there is a peculiar sound. I stop the car and strengthen it manually. Behind the conversation, Stephen did not notice how it began to blow his nose, and the sky was covered with steel clouds. It looks like we need to look for a secluded spot. It's getting darker by the minute. It looks like it's going to rain. Stephen turned to the girl. I know a cozy place. Let's go. Evelyn put on the gas. She drove Stephen to a restaurant on the other side of town. A few steps from her house, the parking lot employee grinned into his mustache. As she helped the guy open the car door, it jammed shut. Stephen felt as if the girl was patronizing him. It caused some awkwardness, but at the same time it felt good. Stephen had grown up in a deficit of care and could therefore appreciate its manifestations. He lifted his head up, and at the same moment streams of water rushed down from the sky. The young men ran toward the restaurant. Half darkness reigned there, and a snowy melody poured through the hall. The bartender looked sympathetically at Jenna and Stephen. He gestured with his hand to call them to follow him. In the back room, the guy handed them 2 strong towels, and they wiped their damp heads. The bartender smiled affectionately at the girl. You're adventurous as always. Stephen realized that Jenna and the young man had known each other for a long time. Well, yes, it's me. The girl laughed. All 3 of them returned to the hall. Evelyn approached a vacant table in its depths. Come here, she whispered toward Stephen. He walked toward her, and she pulled him toward the table. There they sat across from each other. Soon a waiter approached the couple, and they placed their order. Or rather, Evelyn made it. She was very attentive to Stephen, and it seemed to him that it was not Camille, but she herself who had taken the initiative to get acquainted. Jenna quickly understood his tastes and predilections. She took a quick look at the menu and decided what he would drink and eat. What she chose, surprising, was her preference in alcohol. In large portions, she devoured Jack Daniels, and Stephen picked up a bottle of collectible red wine. It was immediately obvious that Evelyn was a regular at this establishment, because all of its employees were eager to please her, plowing around like moths. Suddenly, Stephen realized that the society of this girl was very pleasant to him. He did not let himself be broken by his mother, did not succumb to her influence. But Jenna's strength is soft, quite different. She was attentive, showed great interest in the life of the guy, and unobtrusively cared. That's the payoff. Stephen asked her to tell me about herself. I was surprised at how interesting the girl's fate was. She was a little older than him by more than 2 years. She was born into a well-to-do family, but early on she wanted independence, so she started her own business several times. The initial capital was allocated to her by her father, but the first attempts were unsuccessful. He failed. Now I'm doing just fine. She smiled, taking one sip of whiskey after another. It was amazing, but Jenna had become a successful businesswoman. She owned several fashion magazines. This girl was obsessed with everything. She passionately talked to Stephen about the intricacies of her profession. And then, feeling that her narration bored the interlocutor, told the guy about her hobbies. They were somewhat extreme. Hiking in the mountains, racing on kayaks on raging strong rivers, swimming in forbidden places. Stephen could only wonder that his new acquaintance was not into space travel. At the end of the evening, he was fascinated by the girl. Her determination, courage, and faith in her own strength could be envied by any man. He was afraid to admit to himself that the girl had touched his heart. Jenna was different from many others. She was interesting to be with. Among many charming, intelligent, and beautiful women, she stood out. There was in her some kind of mesmerizing mystery. Next to this girl's soul arose some inexplicable awe. Wanted to drown in a relationship with this reckless representative of the weaker sex. Stephen caught himself at the thought that all his previous romances did not cause him the desire to open up and behave relaxed. They had been smooth, unremarkable encounters with a slight tinge of lust. How many of them had been such arousing his quiet interest? Dozens, hundreds. In general, Stephen was driven by a single desire to add to his collection of men. By and large, these were women who were completely alien to him. Jenna, on the other hand, had managed to become his own for the evening. He didn't want to part with her. In all, her appearance distorted such inner confidence that she involuntarily attracted looks from the outside. But that wasn't what attracted a man. I have not seen such beauties. With amazement, he caught himself at the thought that he admired her swift gait, radiant smile, manner of gesticulating. Stephen watched with awe the new feeling that was budding in the depths of his soul. It was an attractive one. The condition was unusual for him. It bathed him in cocktails, excitement, involvement. The guy couldn't understand at all what was clinging to his dictates. It was something inexplicable. He'd only met her today, but he'd immediately accepted all of her as she was. Now it seemed to him that he had known her for years. This was the way she was his own. He felt no shadow of embarrassment or discomfort in her presence. Stephen realized that he was completely relaxed around her. Literally, within hours, he realized that this was his woman. Not once did he get bored while talking to her. Not once did he think about business or anyone else. Evelyn, really absorbing all of his attention. At the same time, the girl was not intrusive and did not claim adoration or love. Stephen realized that in front of him was a completely independent person, and whatever their relationship in the future, he would not be able to own her completely. Jenna would always have her own world, hidden from everyone else, only at her own will. She will open the doors to it briefly and only to a select few, but will never fully let anyone in, ever. Not because she does not trust, but because it is her way of life, the need to have that very soulful island where you can freely enjoy your own fantasies, dreams, and reflections. Let's date, Stephen suggested. Girls. Seriously, she laughed. Yes, I think we're right for each other. Or maybe I'm wrong, he asked. No, it seems that way. Evelyn looked at him point blank, and then Stephen felt a languid, passionate feeling enveloping him, despite the fire of desire that had enveloped him. He remained outwardly calm and cold. Jenna looked at him with her marvelous velvet brown eyes, and Stephen read understanding in them. The girl silently rose from the table, and he followed her. The rain had stopped outside, and the city was illuminated by the last rays of the setting sun. They raced in her limousine through the empty streets. Then a thick purple twilight descended upon the land. The couple entered a posh house with no one inside. Evelyn led Stephen into her bedroom. The room was in semi-darkness. She turned on only one night light, offered him a shower, and after he heard herself disappear into the bathroom, she came into view. Stephen, about 10 minutes later, and without false fuss, threw off her towels. The boy followed her example. He admiringly looked over her slender young body, then boldly approached her and enclosed the girl in an embrace. Even in intimacy, she did not belong to him completely. He then slipped away, then hot, then cold change of her emotional states, surprised and turned the guy on at the same time. He really wanted to possess her in every way. But even after he had possessed the girl and was left with the feeling that Jenna did not belong to anyone, Nevertheless, he enjoyed being with her immensely. She knew what men wanted and knew how to enjoy intimacy with them herself. The girl easily gave him her body, but she wouldn't let anyone near her soul. Well, he pondered, so be it, but she's the most amazing woman I've ever met. Yes, I realize there will always be a distance between us. This is a woman who is a loner by nature. And of course, she'll never be my wife. She just won't want to lose her freedom. But I won't force her. Let her be with me only as long as she wants to be with me. She'll leave. It'll hurt, but I'll let her go because I realize Evelyn is a free bird. And no shackles, not even the greatest love or passion, can keep her from flying solo. And now he enjoyed any communication with the beautiful girl, her gaze, not arbitrary body movement, languid sigh, and next to her the whole world remained somewhere behind. Stephen was immersed in that unchanging mystery of being when he and she were alone together. They were united by a strong attraction. Stephen could not regulate his communication with Evelyn. The place and meetings were always chosen by her herself, and he only waited to listen to the roar of the engine of her Cadillac. The guy waited and prepared for every date with her, so the feeling he harbored for the young woman was a pinch of longing. He realized that someday this connection would suddenly cut off, and he would lose forever. She overshadowed all his other women, became that fatal beauty, next to which it was impossible to hook up even one innocent affair. The other ladies lost to her from the beginning because they dissolved in the shadow of her charisma. She was too bright and wonderfully nun-like. Evelyn's relationship was passionate, and at the same time, there was a certain detachment between them from each other. The girl often plunged into her inner world and revealed to the guy only some of her qualities. Therefore, Stephen sometimes felt abandoned and lonely. Sometimes he had no information for weeks about what his beloved was doing, but he bore it stoically. It was ready to tolerate everything for the sake of a couple of dates with her. Anticipation about the end of their relationship constantly tormented the soul of the man, as if he stood on a slippery stone in the middle of the raging elements and was afraid to fall. But the tragedy that occurred in life was more terrible than all his fantasies. It literally tore his soul to shreds. Stephen certainly knew that his woman had other men, and she often spent time with them. But the horrible revelation was that Evelyn was on drugs, and had been for a long time. Throughout their entire relationship, he had never noticed any signs of it. This sad circumstance determined the final chords of their love. Once again, Evelyn disappeared for a long time, and she was found breathless in a city hotel room. The cause of death was a drug overdose. Stephen was running around like a wounded animal. He wasn't ready to let Jenna go, not for good. He hadn't intruded into her world while she was alive, but to lose her irrevocably. No, it was beyond him. This tragedy had transformed Stephen from a young boy into a mature man. He had no friend or family shoulder to lean on during this difficult time. He experienced personal misfortune all alone, and it broke the lad's soul. He was still long stranger to the bottomless gaze. Jenna's velvet voice. Some nights he'd jump out of bed covered in vapors. He thought he could taste the sweet taste of her lips and the exultant scent of her body. In time, Stephen came to terms with it, but a ringing emptiness settled inside him. He began to fill it with alcohol and promiscuous sex. In the moment, when the man got drunk and indulged in flat successes with strangers, it seemed to him that the pain was going away. However, when he woke up in the morning, heavy emotions encompassed his soul in an even tighter ring. Stephen sank deeper and deeper into the abyss of drunkenness and debauchery. In this frenzy, he could not even properly mourn the departure of his mother, did not want to forgive her coldness and indifference, and he could not let her go to the next world with gratitude for his birth and all that she had given him on this sinful earth. The resentment remained in his heart. Stephen was fiercely angry at his mother and his beloved as if they were alive. The only thing that kept him afloat was business worries sobering the young man. As he labored in the office, he felt like a man wallowing in the pain of loss. Stephen realized that he was probably doomed to be alone, To meet someone like Evelyn again was impossible. He had given up hope of personal happiness. To keep from going mad, he was looking for new adventures. And now, with a swaggering, unsteady gait, he was walking through the city. Soft light poured in from the windows of the houses, and appetizing smells wafted through the windows. Somewhere a television was on, somewhere music was playing. It seemed to the man that there in the walls of these houses all people were happy, and someone needed them. He was in a hurry to get rid of this feeling and to leave the territory, where smelled cozy and happiness. Not because he was jealous, but because he was getting worse there. The man's hair fluttered in the wind, and he kept walking, unable to see the road. Out of the lilac haze of fog, a woman's silhouette appeared right in front of him, and he boldly went to get acquainted. The lady was beautiful and uninhibited. He stood in front of her and put his hand on her shoulder. The stranger did not even flinch, and Stephen felt better, for he felt the warmth of a human body. There was a gaping emptiness and an animalistic glint in the woman's eyes. He understood her without words, took her under his arm, and together they moved forward. At the inn, the night guest treated Stephen without resistance or objection. She gave herself to him. At 12 o'clock, he woke up in bed and found a luscious, hungover blonde beside him. His head split open, but he needed to get to the office, as he silently started to pack. The girl's face reflected bewilderment. "Were you paid to stay until 2? Let's stay together. We spent such a beautiful night." Stephen nodded silently. Overcoming the growing disgust in his soul was a mixture of guilt and squeamishness. He had experienced it when saying goodbye to random ladies. This condition was repeated every time. Stephen carefully concealed this attitude from his partners, but could do nothing about his own feelings. "I'm gonna shower and go to work. Will you leave a phone number?" the blonde asked. "Text me yours. I'll call you back." It was a phrase Stephen said to every woman he spent the night with, but he never called any of them back. Under the cool lines of the water, he came to his senses, but the munchies from last night were slowly wearing off. Feeling the degrees still playing in his body, Stephen decided to walk to the office. It was not far. He easily covered the distance of 1 block, but the day was heating up, and the hot August sun glared down on the young man. Stephen unbuttoned his shirt collar and walked over to the fountain. He realized that it would look rather strange. A successful businessman washing his face right in this urban facility. But right now he didn't care. Stephen walked over to one of the pounding water features and put his head under it, the illuminating currents doing their thing. He was immediately relieved and moved forward. In the public garden where the fountain was playing, not far away on a bench sat a girl. Passing by her, Stephen heard quiet sobs. Involuntarily, he turned around. The stranger was very thin and pale. Not a gram of makeup. Thin fingers of hands nervously passing pens. Textile bags full of tears. Big blue eyes. Stephen sat down next to her. "So, what are we giving here?" With a sneer, he asked. The girl flinched. The young man expected her to rudely answer him to jump up from the bench and run away. However, she turned to him and often clapped her eyes. "You know, I am grateful to you for asking me what I am crying about. No one has asked me that for a long time. No one I know cares. They're all in a hurry. I think they're running away from their own and other people's problems. They don't want to empathize with their neighbors. It's like it's none of their business. It is easier to pass by than to get into the problem or help trustingly." The stranger shared with him. "Someone will say that you should leave your worries at home. But I have almost no close people. There is no one to ease my soul. One grandmother. She won't say no, she'll listen. But there are things I can't tell her. I'm afraid of disturbing her." Stephen looked at the girl with surprise and was amazed that she was so hasty in opening her soul to a stranger. He noticed that the stranger was very modestly dressed and realized her income was very modest. He did not feel sorry for the girl, but the situation was curious. Therefore, Stephen did not interrupt her, but listened attentively. "You know, I went around all the offices in search of a job, and everywhere rejected. no experience. And my grandmother's pension is not even enough for food. She's a sick person, even though she's keeping up. But she's a sick person. A lot of money is spent on medicines, and utilities have to be paid. But I can't help her at all. She raised me. She gave everything, lived for me. And I don't get a chance to thank her. I can't get a job. That's all. I have no strength left. I just sit and cry. She cried deeply again. Stephen looked at her more closely and thought that he had never made such an unusual acquaintance before. "And what is your education?" he asked philologically. "I just went to school to get a job. There's a gymnasium across the square, and a teacher was needed." Stephen scratched the back of his head, and an absolutely wild idea occurred to him, and he voiced it. "I need a secretary here. Oh, take me. I know the computer." The girl exclaimed hopefully. "Well, you're in luck. I am the owner of a respectable brokerage firm, and I can help. I think you are literate in this regard." "Yes, I have a red diploma." The girl rummaged through her bag and showed it to Stephen. He pretended to scrutinize it. "Well, I'll hire you if you want to," and the girl's eyes flashed genuine interest. "Really? Why? Am I really going to deceive inexperienced ladies?" At these words, the stranger blushed thickly. "I'm very grateful to you. You're just saving me." Her eyes are more important again. "But don't feel bad, Wendy." She stared at Stephen in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "From my diploma, actually." I showed it to her. "Oh yes," the girl smiled trustingly. "But I have one condition," the man continued. "Oh, anything you want," the girl promised. And Stephen decided to make an experiment, to create a tempting situation for this young girl to see how she would react. He stood up and examined her from head to toe. And his type, of course. However, the girl's looks were pleasant, and the more he interacted with her, the more attractive he found her. Wendy had a lovely doll face with bottomless eyes, a dainty nose and pretty lips. She had stopped crying, and a delicate blush and charming round dimples appeared on her girlish cheeks. Stephen scratched the back of his head, then began to adjust the belt on his pants. "Well, anyway, you're going to have to do me an intimate favor." "Well, right there in the office on your first day of work." After these words, Wendy often blinked her eyes. Her eyebrows rose up in surprise. "That's a must. But somehow I wanted to pay for everything in this life." "How did you put it?" "You don't have the money, so we'll take someone else's." Wendy was completely confused and insulted, jumped up from the bench, but then pulled herself together and boldly looked Stephen in the face. "Give me the address, please. I'll come to apply for a job. I'll be there. It won't cost me anything. We'll be able to provide for my grandmother and me." "That's right," he said. "Your salary will be good." Stephen gave the address of the office and said goodbye to the girl. He was sure she would change her mind, wouldn't come to work tomorrow. Some fleeting, joyful feeling, like sunlight slipping among the clouds, lighted up the man's heart, but it immediately disappeared into the depths of his dark thoughts. Looking at the man's receding figure, Wendy felt uneasy. How to go to him tomorrow? And why give herself to a stranger? She had no choice. The strength taken from years of hardship was running out. She and her grandmother needed a piece of bread. So Wendy had no qualms about the ordeal ahead of her. Of course, it was unpleasant. After all, she had never had a man before. But life had left her no choice. She couldn't sit on her grandmother's neck all the time. Wendy remembered her unhappy childhood. She'd once had a full family, a mother and father, and even a philosopher grandfather. A picture of him teaching her to read from a children's primer came to mind, on the porch of the village house. And then came this misfortune. Her parents had traveled with her to her grandmother's house, and there had been a gas leak. Only Vanessa and Wendy survived, thanks to the fact that they were sleeping in the far bedroom, window open. But despite this, they were also taken away from there by ambulance in serious condition. The doctors managed to pump the victims out, and then began a difficult litigation with the guardianship, Wendy wanted to take away from her grandmother because of her low income and advanced age. But the spirited woman fought to the end and won her granddaughter back. She realized that she could not give her a wide range of opportunities in life, but she could surround the little girl with warmth and love. And the woman did everything possible and even impossible to raise her granddaughter. Yeah, they didn't have much. Sometimes they even had to borrow food from a neighbor before the guardianship came. They both looked at them, drooling, but they couldn't touch them. And after the patronage of the social services, they took everything back. But they didn't want to part. Native people who loved each other, no one else could give them such happiness. And so, overcoming all adversity, they stayed together. Through ill health, Vanessa was engaged in lessons with her granddaughter. This made her a very good student. This allowed Wendy to enter on a budget. She remembered how she and her grandmother celebrated the occasion, with homemade wine from grapes that grew on their plot and fragrant strawberries from their own vegetable garden. It was small, but kept in perfect order. You bet, because they had been feeding from it for a whole year. They managed to grow potatoes, beets, onions, dried apples from the forest for the winter. However, they had enough cherry jam to stock up on. Is 2 women too much to ask? Of course, Wendy wanted to have beautiful clothes and in childhood toys. But from a very early age, she realized that there was something more important than things. She treasured that warm and affectionate relationship with her grandmother, and she thanked God that she wasn't taken from her somewhere. Wendy was used to labor and discipline from childhood. Her grandmother's upbringing helped her to keep the best human qualities in her and always be herself. The girl knew that she was very strong, but now her soul was broken. Not every young shoulders could withstand the hardships she went through. However, the girl did not cry anymore, wiped the tears from her eyes, and decided that she would definitely go tomorrow to the office at the named address and do everything this paper man asked her to do. And then she would work faithfully. Wendy went to her home. She was in a state of confusion. The joy of finding a job had been covered up by a lewd offer from her future boss. The rest of the day flew by. To forget a little and shake off the unpleasant feelings, Wendy did all the chores around the house, whatever she could get her hands on. By evening, she was tired. I decided to call Grandma for tea. Anticipating the pleasure, she cut in half a loaf and abundantly smeared it with apple jam. Although here she put the impressively sized sandwich in front of her grandmother. Well, Grandma, do you want a hearty meal? Oh, that's what I mean. To live a life of pleasure, laughed Vanessa. Yeah, agreed Wendy. Now I'm going to shower, and I'll get in touch, and we'll go for a promenade before bed. The sun was sloping towards sunset when she and her grandmother went for a walk. They decided to walk all the way to the quarry. Not the nearest light, but pleasantly, reasoned Wendy. The rest of the day flew by. Wendy and Grandma loved these summer evenings. Easy for both of them. Walking along the forest road beneath tall pines, the quarry appeared in the distance, but already you could make out its dark Moldovan water. The crowns of the young spruce trees that had been planted near it a few years ago. Soon they approached it and started throwing small pebbles into the water from the shore. Imperceptibly, the lilac twilight thickened over them, and the travelers hurried home. They did not want to walk through the forest in the dark, but on the narrow forest road they met a very ancient old Bradshaw woman with a stick in her hand. "Would you say, sweetheart?" she asked. "There's a high voltage far out here." "We haven't heard of one," replied Wendy. As she got closer, the girl was able to make out the passersby. She was about 80 years old, no less. "Oh my God. I've been reading too much. I think I'm lost. Where does this road lead to?" "To the city." "Where do you want to go?" Vanessa asked. "Oh, then I'm going the wrong way." The old woman fussed, turning back. Wendy looked up at the sky. It was only a little over half an hour before it was completely dark. "Wait, where are you going?" "There's no high voltage that way either. This road goes all the way to the quarry and ends there." "Where did you come from?" "From a cottage farm, from the forest." So I have a cottage there, and the live one is now in mine. So you're coming from there now with the forest. Vanessa mentally estimated the trajectory loomed decent kilometers. She marveled at the antics, but you won't make it back in the light. The forest is big, and in some places heavily overbeloten. Only this road is rented by hunters, but it breaks off near the forest. People have often been confused in this area. They've even found human remains of travelers who lost their way in the forest and couldn't find their way out. Look, it'll be dark soon. You won't find your way back in the dark. It'll only get more confusing. Come with us, and in the morning you'll take the train to your place. It leaves around 800. The woman recovered a little, but then she agreed. On the way she said that she went to the forest from early morning and imperceptibly passing from mushrooms from berries. Berries deepened into the thicket for about 7 kilometers. And that's if you count in a straight line. One could only wonder at her vigor and physical endurance. At her age, I'm from the city myself, my grandmother said. My father used to live there, but we moved away a long time ago. I was a girl. My mother died early, right after giving birth. My father was 6 years old when he got married. Then he married a woman, and we went to live with her. She made an excellent stepmother. Not everyone can find such a mother. She was so nice. She's dead now, of course. God rest her soul. And my father's in the other world, and my husband has recently left. But I'm still living. 3 kids. God sent them. Good, caring ones. But they've gone to different cities. Such frankness of a random travel companion surprised Wendy, and she, herself, not understanding why, suddenly revealed to her companion all today's story that had happened to her in the park. Vanessa looked at her surprised, but did not utter a word of reproach. I'll tell it all out loud. The girl breathed a sigh of relief and felt as if a huge stone had fallen off her soul, interfering with her life further, spilling everything to a stranger. And she listened, nodding and mumbling to herself. During the conversation, they did not notice how they approached the town. At home, they took the grandmother as their own. And in the daylight, she did not seem so ancient. The women offered her shelter, a warm bed and hot tea with a loaf generously smeared with jam. The rays of light and the old woman's eyes were full of gratitude. After tea, she lay down and fell fast asleep. And on the morning before work, Wendy accompanied her to the electric train, comfortably settled in the carriage. Smiling grandmother in the open window waved goodbye to the girl, wrinkles in hand. Thank you, honey, that you did not abandon on the road. It's no big deal. You don't go into the woods alone anymore, do you? It's scary. You might not get any help. Thank you. I won't. I've had enough of walking. She smiled and suddenly added, and you, daughter, don't think that nothing just happens in the world. Go get a job. And that guy, don't be afraid. You'll do as he asked. Unexpected happiness will come into your life. Take my word for it. The train rumbled and moved off. At a loss, Wendy followed it. She forever remembered the kind, old woman's face and her shrewd, tenacious gaze. With 3 novelties, Wendy went to the broker's office. And what was Stephen's surprise when he saw yesterday's acquaintance outside his office. And she'd arrived before the office opened. Charming what? He thought. What am I going to do with her in terms of intimacy? And why would I want her? It's silly. Well, a young girl like that will be a wonder to me. Oh, hello, young one. He turned to Wendy. Honestly, I thought you weren't coming. You would have shown up sooner, though. Well done. But let's see how you do after you've checked in with HR, shall we? Let's go. He took her under his arm and led her into the office. Stephen felt her stiffen up, all wooden. Yeah, relax, he said. I'm not touching. Let's get organized. And by lunchtime you'll be in my office, she explained. The girl raised her trusting eyes to him and nodded silently. Stephen noticed this time what beautiful, delicately furniture-colored hair she had had when they first met. It had been gathered into a ponytail, and now it fell loosely over her shoulders. It caused him to feel pleasantly under a cloud of sexual fantasy. Stephen walked into his office and immersed himself in his work. In contrast to his frivolous attitude towards the female sex, he went about his work in a collected and businesslike manner. He only broke away from it when Wendy timidly poked her pretty head in the doorway. Frankly, he had already forgotten about the girl. "May I come in?" she asked. "Oh, in time," he laughed. "I really am. I really want to, since you came, and we have a contract. Let's do everything quickly and disperse. You're already registered in the personnel department." "Formalized," the girl answered fearfully. Stephen got up from his seat, walked to the door, and turned the key in the lock. "Well, hurry up and show me what you can do." Wendy began to slowly undress. "What's this?" Stephen's eyes rounded, and he stared in bewilderment at the knit pantaloons, small blue florals. "Lingerie," the girl answered bewilderedly. "From what grandmother's trunk did you get them?" The man just rolled with laughter. "No, my dear, they are not lingerie," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "It's some kind of priority cling." He wrinkled his nose. "Look, go to work sometime. That's a very exotic outfit you're wearing." "I wanted something." He couldn't help himself and laughed. "I feel like I've undressed my grandmother. Go. I'm unilaterally terminating our contract. You're making me cry. Go ahead and don't take offense. But I'm really not mean." He often wanted to show off his sexual exploits to his buddies, but the pantaloon story suddenly became personal and untouchable. It was funny, but he didn't want to reveal it to any third party. Stephen caught himself smiling blissfully as he stared into space. "Good thing I have a separate office," he thought, and got to work. Wendy slipped out of his business suite and froze by the door. Complete confusion reigned in her soul. The girl didn't know what she should do. To be upset because she had caused Homeric laughter at the chief, or to rejoice that he had lost his desire for Polonsky like a tomato. She returned to her seat and tried to concentrate on her work. The next day, Stephen came through the reception area. He said hello to his regular secretary. Nancy was a beautiful lady with a mind-blowing figure, large breasts and round hips, hers colored in various light shades. Her hair was gathered on her head in such a ponytail. Her makeup was bright and professional. She sat by the computer simply, nodding her perfectly painted guesses at the keyboard. He glanced toward Wendy. She, too, was at her workstation. Meeting the chief's gaze, she all folded up and literally squirmed in her office chair. Stephen felt as if the fragile girl was about to disappear into space. "Hello," he said casually. "You could say congratulations on your first day of work. Yesterday was a baptism of fire." He smirked meaningfully, and the girl blushed. "I will." What questions he had for Nancy. She's in the business. "Nancy," he turned to the secretary. "You distributing the duties so that it's easier for her for now. What about you is more complicated. You understand, while she gets up to speed." Of course, Stephen performed everything to the best of his ability. "She's a girl. She's got a high typing speed. I checked it out. We have a lot of turnover. I'll just give it to her now, and I'll take care of the urgent stuff." "Nancy, what a clever girl you are," Stephen said with admiration. A satisfied smile stretched across the blonde's face, and Stephen entered his office and immediately forgot about both ladies. He was so absorbed in his work that he often didn't hear what was going on around him. When the man left the office in the evening, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. "This is for you." Stephen pulled out of the bag several packages of expensive French underwear. "That these are normal underpants?" He grinned. The girl blushed thickly. "You what?" "I don't need anything." "Yes, you do. I saw it with my own eyes." "And what you have? Burn it. In fact, you know what? I'll give you a bonus. You go to closet, change your hair. You know, all that feminine stuff. And that's a must, of course. Otherwise, I'll fire you for sure." "Well convinced," she agreed. While Stephen went down to the exit of the building, on his face waited a mysterious smile. But it happened to buy underpants for the secretary, not for his mistress, not for his wife, but just from the street. He shrugged his shoulders, but noted to himself that he was in an elevated mood. A week later, Nancy literally burst in on him with a perplexed look. She turned to the chief. "Stephen, but what a good girl. Indeed, her help is invaluable. But I can't get her to dress differently. It's such junk that our partners are horrified when they look in the waiting room." Stephen took his head off the papers, and it hit him. The girl had absolutely no money, and he'd forgotten what he'd said about the bonus. "Nancy, I'll take care of this matter myself. Go to your office," he commanded. When the man left his office, it was already dark outside the window. It was the 11th hour of the night, and Wendy was still sitting at her desk in the same pose. "What are you doing here so late?" he wondered. "Yes, I wasted a lot of time while I was sorting it out, and the documentation needs to be done for tomorrow. So I stayed late," quietly whispered the girl. "And you diligently," grinned Stephen. "It's a pity only in the business sphere, in others not so much." He gave her a sly look. Wendy stood up from the table and mumbled embarrassedly, "Well, I've finished. Permission to go?" "I'm not." Stephen said with ostentatious distinction that it was getting late, and such valuable employees I prefer to drive personally. "So please, mademoiselle, gentlemen, welcome to my private car." He theatrically gave the girl his hand, and she trustingly accepted it. Together they went downstairs. He opened the car door for her, and she settled into the front seat. The engine roared to life, and the crossover sped off. Wendy gave a startled gasp. "Oh, come on, Stephen. We're in town, not on the highway. You're telling me off. Tell me, please, what's the right one? Just a few days in the office, and I'm on the short end of the stick with the brass." And he laughed. "But since you're so brave, I'm sure you'll take my remark adequately." "Oh, and how to her remarks?" The girl got worried. Of course, speak up, I'll fix everything." "Well, it is not on the documents. Do not worry," he calmed the girl. "It's on your appearance. You see how stylish Nancy is. You, too, need to tidy up your closet to match your business status. But we've safely replaced some of the old stuff. At least I hope so." Stephen glanced meaningfully at Wendy, and she lowered her eyes. "Come on, you're embarrassed in front of the chief, with whom you were one step away from an intimate moment." Remembering the situation, the man was in a playful mood. "So I haven't gotten Stephen's first paycheck yet to buy the clothes I need," justified Wendy. "But I can't wait for you to get it. It's in the accounting department, and I can't give it to you sooner. Why don't you and I stop by the convenience store and pick out something for tomorrow anyway? Nancy's been buzzing around. It's a distraction from work." "But why would you want to spend so much money?" asked the girl. Wendy exhaled tiredly. "Stephen, but let's go in private. Call me Stephen. That's one. And two is let me decide for myself, unnecessary or not unnecessary. Not for me. Why don't you cut the crap and wear it normally? And then we'll decide about this money, all right?" Wendy nodded in agreement. Stephen led the girl to a boutique with very expensive clothes to her questioning and indignant look. He had already prepared the necessary arguments. "I run an expensive firm and my secretaries have to be dressed up. Accordingly, you may not blink your lovely eyes. I don't accept any objections. Girl," he called the sales girl, "would you be kind enough to match my girl's strict office bow?" He glanced contentedly at the remote Baroque lady, then took a seat on the plush sofa and began leisurely digging through his phone messages. When Wendy came out of the prime, paid again, and business attire, he gave a contented thumbs up and calmly said, "Well, that's what I wanted. Just perfect. Now you look appropriate to your status. Thank you." He turned to the girl serving them. Then he paid for his purchases and drove Wendy home. She got out of the car with a happy smile and thanked him for the purchases. "Well, let's go, it's getting late, and there's a lot of work tomorrow. I did it not only for you, but also for me. Good night." He drove off, flashing his headlights for her. After driving a few meters away, Stephen stopped the car and wondered inwardly. In him woke up such a mischievous boy who seemed to sleep for many years. The man realized that he liked these feelings very much, and they were directly related to Wendy. Communicating with her gave him great pleasure. And today, he could hardly hide his admiration when she came out of the premiere. Totally refreshed, he could not show his admiration for her, for he himself had not yet realized what a pleasant and joyous state of mind was entering his life. To Stephen, this feeling was absolutely new. The memory of greatness was still alive in his heart, but it was somewhat detached. And often that coldness gave them away from each other. Love for her had not warmed his heart, nor had it evoked such intoxicating warmth and joy as was now developing in the man's soul. These soft currents of magical feelings were rolling over his whole being. He wondered to himself where it came from in him and why it felt so good now. What was this miracle that had happened in his destiny? After all, Stephen could not even suppose that this young girl would catch his eye. The man even felt a slight pang of jealousy because he imagined what a dazzling impression Wendy would make tomorrow morning, and many men would throw interested glances at her. The next morning, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. "You look marvelous. Transformed. I can't tell a story. I can't describe it. Just a different woman, I must say. Beautiful." As he opened the door to his office, he stopped and made a gesture. A thumbs up. "And this one, don't even doubt in the slightest that your fabulously good pantaloons burned." He winked at her. "Burned," the girl smiled. He sat down at his desk and couldn't gather his thoughts. Wendy, the image of her and the girl had followed him like an obsession. Some kind of illumination had settled in his soul, boyish moods and resentments of the past. The sorrows and tragedies receded into the background. She was so bright, cheerful, and sincere that next to her did not want to play the role of macho. And most importantly, Stephen realized that with her he was real, without social husks, and such a man liked himself more. And that in general he liked to enjoy life and be happy. He suddenly wanted to embrace this thin and defenseless girl, tenderly kiss her on the cheek and shield her from all the misfortunes of this world. Her purity evoked in his soul. Her purity evoked in Stephen's soul an extraordinary delight and faith in the best. If fate had sent him such a tender and unsophisticated devoted girl, it meant that she had given him a chance to free himself from the shell and enjoy the strong moments of life. He was delighted with this new joyous and pure feeling. But I was afraid at the same time. He started acting like a boy. In the office he was stern and severe with Wendy, and in the evenings he'd stand guard outside her house and watch her from the window of his car. He laughed at himself for turning into a young bully. With his money and status in life, Stephen realized that he was acting like an idiot. Just a short time ago, he had been a risky chucklehead and teased Wendy every day. Now it seemed from the outside that he was avoiding her. But for now, he couldn't help his inner shyness. He was also kind of embarrassed to show his feelings in front of the secretary and the blonde. After all, she had unwittingly witnessed their relationship. In such a suspended state, Stephen stayed for about 2 months, until Nancy brought him out into the open. Stephen once turned to her when she was bringing important papers for him to sign. "You're breaking yourself all the time. Is your attitude towards the new girl on your face? Is it readable by your behavior?" The blonde smiled slyly, which is clearly visible to everyone. Scared Stephen. "Well, not all of it. I could see the spark between a man and a woman right away. It's already a flame between you two. The man between us is dumbfounded." "You mean her?" "Stephen, you're such a tough cookie. And now you're just smeared. But get your act together and eventually ask her out on a real date. Without all the poking and prodding. You think the man scratched the tip of his nose. Of course, to an outsider, the situation is obvious. You like each other, and it's time for you to be together." Nancy's words made Stephen's heart warm. He thought that after his idiotic proposal in the park, Wendy was not serious about him, and certainly not considering him as a suitor. But the blonde was so encouraging to his boss that he decided to talk to Wendy alone that very evening. "Look, I want to spend some time with you." Right off the bat, He started at the end of the day. Yeah, Stephen, I'm ready. And Wendy had to pack a notebook and a tape recorder in her bag. You don't get it. I want a personal relationship with you. Oh, I'm not your equal. Equal or not, thank God, it's up to me. Let's give it a shot of hope. Stephen turned to her. What would it take? I'm inexperienced. Embarrassed the girl. Come on. You don't know. Your task is simple: to be yourself. Stephen smiled. But also to go out with me. What do you say? I don't know what will come of it, but it will be a curious experiment. Let's assume that we have a tentative agreement. And what will be our first date? The girl asked. I'll think about it, Stephen promised. He understood perfectly well that the standard scheme of seduction in the case of Wendy will not work. One could, of course, force her to sleep with him by blackmail. But that seemed disgusting to him now. The man sincerely wanted to like the girl for real. Days passed in his thoughts, and he noted to himself that his activity was not as vigorous as usual. Stephen was distracted all the time by thoughts of the girl. At the end of the week, he peeked into the reception area, without his permission. Nancy, sneaking out early, but he was glad she'd shown wits and some sass. Now he and Wendy could not be interrupted by anyone. Stephen walked over to the girl and stared at her for somewhat longer than usual. Wendy jumped up from her chair. Stephen, I'm not staying late today. I'm leaving. Just tidying up my desk. Yeah, I can see that. Good for you. You're getting the hang of it. Except I asked you to call me Stephen when we're alone. No, I'm gonna go by my first name in the office. What do you want to do? I was going to suggest something. Stephen's a little hesitant. I'd like you to accompany me on a walk. It's the weekend. We could spend it outdoors. I've been wanting to go to a walking park for a long time. They say it's very cool, all Russian-style bogaters. So I want to invite you to come with me. I'd love to, but I promised my grandmother I'd go with her. We haven't been anywhere in a long time. I wanted to buy theater tickets. I've been thinking about it. You know what? Why don't you invite her to come with us? I think a woman would be interested too. It's not a long ride in comfort. Oh, that would be convenient for you, Wendy. If they call me, it's convenient. I'll give you a day to think about it tonight, and I want you to call me tomorrow. I hope it's a favorable decision. Wendy called her grandmother with her, and Vanessa gladly agreed. Oh, this is so exciting, she told her granddaughter. After all, it's been a long time since I've been anywhere, much less traveled. Yes, it is curious to see your boss, Stephen, what he is like outside of professional communication. You know, Grandma, I can't understand him. Sometimes he's simple and kind, and sometimes he's weirdly avoidant. He pretends not to notice me at all. Well, trust me, in my experience. Wendy, are you deeply sympathetic to this gentleman? Come on, he's so rich, he has so many beauties at his disposal. Yes, my dear, affairs of the heart. They're not even capitalistic. Rich, not rich. Successful, not successful. That principle doesn't work here. You're young. Forgive me, granddaughter, and you don't have much wisdom. But I'll give you an example. He's the neighbor downstairs. You can't take your eyes off him. A handsome man. I saw women running after him before my eyes. They were ready to tie the shoelaces on his sneakers. A girl. A little redhead, still puny, but just classy. But he's talkative, and he loves her. Who doesn't look at the pretties? She's the only one he's ever wanted. So it's okay. They're good parents in their family. They cured 3 of them. It would seem that they're completely different people, and even after they cheat on each other, they stick together. I had a friend who was like that. Here's her story. When she was young, handsome Kim got tuberculosis. So one day he comes home with a voucher for recuperative treatment. And the next day a woman with charm, like a sin, meets the chief accountant with his work and starts thanking her for taking such care of her husband. Say, thank you for the allotted voucher. The woman's eyes in a pile, like a duck, a voucher. Never had one. Valka sprints home and goes into her husband's pocket and there's a treacherous bag of anger next to the voucher. Say, I'm waiting for you, my dear, my beloved, in such and such a room with a NATO reception. Treatment of sexual recuperation. Gathering all his scorned honor in a fist, rushed mother-in-law in that sanatorium entered the room, waiting to separate from breakfast, and on the bed sees knitting, scarf, shawl under it. And there's a teddy bear from her mistress. Our Valia read outright. What love? What love? She sits, grieving, rubbing the umbrella in her hands. That's when the villain comes out. He meets his mistress, and he kicks his lawful wife in the legs. Forgive me, I'm not to blame. He came himself. Woman ball. But proud stepped over the prostrate body, not forgetting a couple of times to kick the rival on the head of the husband unfaithful. Kicked her out on arrival. And then took her mother's advice to take her back. Who would want such a trained lady? And with 2 kids. Kim never got tuberculosis again. And there are plenty of such examples, my dear. And there are successful women and beautiful as dolls from head to toe, well-groomed, and at work honor and a tight purse. But there is no female happiness. Lonely. And for a woman it's right. She will not rest until she realizes herself as a wife and mother. That's our nature, so don't look at his wealth, and don't get scared. Act natural. Maybe he is tired of these capricious and rich kings, and pulled the man to something real. You're guileless, and you're straight and beautiful. I'm the one with the granddaughter. You don't even need makeup. Everything about you is tender, soft, and feminine. Oh, thank you, Grandma, for your kind words. I believe you. I guess it's all true. How many heart-to-heart talks have we had with you? You've never been wrong once. Always right. It's not just intuition, it's logic. I'll tell you the signs, and you apply them to the chief and you'll know his intentions. Many young ladies often wonder about the attitude of their chosen one, whether he is keen and loves sincerely and deeply. If such questions disturb your soul, you need to analyze the actions of your partner. There are several aspects of a man's behavior by which you can judge his feelings. He notices the merits and often talks about them. He is really sincerely attached to a woman if he evaluates her comprehensively, admires the appearance, character, abilities, achievements of his chosen one. He notices not only beautiful legs, but also a sharp mind, kind disposition, a subtle sense of humor, the ability to support in critical moments. Often admires a woman. He looks at a special, not oily, full of passion eyes, but warmly and with tenderness. Many men like to look at their favorites, furtively enjoying their beauty and grace from afar or while sleeping. But close eye contact does not strain them. They do not hide their gaze and do not look away. Sensitive to change. He always pays attention to a new hairstyle or outfit beloved. Subtly feels the changes in her mood and behavior. Generous on compliments and on praise. She positively evaluates the desire for development in the profession. Well, or culinary experiments in the home kitchen. He wants to be close. He lets the chosen one into his space, offers to meet on his territory, gladly shows his home, office, dacha, strives to spend with his beloved as much time as possible. He is comfortable in her society in a busy work schedule. A man like this will always find time. He will call or write a message. And if men prefer to meet in hotels or in the apartment, the partner comes up with a lot of excuses about communicating at home. Rarely calls and writes, so he is not in a hurry to let her into his life. He has to be patient. He's willing to wait for his lady. That goes for everything. Does the girl dress up for a date? Is she late for a meeting or pulling for intimacy? If a man is reverent about the chosen one, he does not rush her with important decisions. When a woman really hooked him, he will be patient and show patience, whether she is capriciously uncollected or not in the mood. Wants to be liked. He makes an effort to look good, pays maximum attention to his hair and clothes, chooses perfume carefully, wants to become closer in the spiritual sphere, so he is actively interested in the worldview, hobbies, friendship of the chosen one. When meeting, he shows gallantly, demonstrates his best qualities. He also values her opinion. If the partner plans a long-term relationship with his chosen one, he listens to her advice when choosing clothes and food. He discusses with his beloved creative projects and prospective plans, allows you to evaluate his actions, performances of movement. In a positive way, he perceives critical comments, and if he considers them fair, he avoids blunders in the future. He also shortens the distance. It is pleasant for him to be in the same space with his chosen one. Therefore, he will not build the boundaries of communication with her, and the desire to be closer is well traced at a random meeting. A loving man opens his arms wide. He smiles and begins to move towards her, not hiding his joy. But if he crosses his arms on his chest, scratches the back of his head, and his smile looks strained, the presence of a lady is not part of his plans. With his entire appearance, he will make it clear that meetings are better planned and limited in time. He demonstrates his achievements. He gladly shows his beloved all the merits of his life. A special disposition and trust are indicated by those cases when a man offers his lady to use his phone, tablet, put on his shirt, try on sunglasses, sit behind the wheel of his favorite car. He spares his beloved's feelings, twiddling his thumbs. He tries to avoid conflicts or situations that upset the chosen one, will not play on her weaknesses and pain points. The first to initiate reconciliation at a rift will stop a protracted dispute. He is sensitive to the tears of his beloved, so he will always embrace her, will calm her down. He will not allow strangers to hurt the feelings of his partner. You know he is ready to change his lifestyle. Here, if a man is interested in a woman, he will roll mountains for her. He will replay plans, take an extraordinary vacation. If necessary, he'll come in the middle of the night. And if there are no feelings, he will come up with 1,000 obstacles to deny her a date or help. The partner of the one has full information about the interests, hobbies, and tastes of the woman he loves. He knows what books she reads, what wine she drinks, what genres of movies she prefers, her favorite flowers and perfume. Without serious intentions, a man's interests are limited to the framework of sexual relations. He easily forgets about things that are meaningful to her. He is sincere and frank. A successful man wants to see in his chosen one not only a beloved, but also a friend. He will trust her with his innermost thoughts and dreams. He will willingly tell about childhood offenses, favorite hobbies, relationships with parents, friends, colleagues. He is honest with the chosen one. If the truth can hurt her, he would rather keep silent than deliberately lie. Includes in the plans for the future. In conversation, a man begins to operate often with the pronoun we. He no longer speaks of himself in the singular person. Now it sounds more often we will decide, we will see. We will think, we will come. So he subconsciously demonstrates readiness for a joint life with the chosen one. By the way, he is attentive in intimate relationships and intimacy. He tries not only to satisfy himself, but also to reveal the possibilities to his partner. First of all, to make it pleasant for her. After the end of intimacy, he does not withdraw at all, but maintains bodily contact. He is open to hugs and touches. He is ready to change for the sake of his beloved. And if a woman is dear to a man, he can give up the most bad habits and will control himself. In order to please her, he will share her hobbies. He will tolerate her friends and relatives, even if he does not like them. He shows care. Serious attitude to a woman is manifested by a desire to help her, that is, to be useful to her. The man is responsive to her requests and zealously takes up the solution of any, sometimes insignificant problem situations. Sacrifice personal time and professional interests. You know he doesn't tolerate competition. He wants to be the only one in his beloved's life. Becomes irritated at the sight of potential rivals. He can't stand comparisons with other men. He is satisfied if he manages to make a good impression on the chosen one and is the first to give her support. He likes it when a woman consults him when making important decisions. She values his point of view. Next, he takes care of the expenses. A man is not in a hurry to pay for a partner who does not interest him, but for his beloved, he will not spare anything. He is constantly invested in her beauty and health. pays for the election in restaurant stores, provides her with a decent life. This is very important for him. Be a leader in the material sphere. Show willingness to take on any financial obligations of the beloved. He is not afraid of responsibility. He willingly tries on the role of the head of the family, is ready to make important decisions and implement them, voices a desire to marry, become a father, takes care of his loved ones, introduces his parents and relatives. When a man decides to take this step, a woman can be sure that his intentions are the most serious. She is the only contender for his heart. He will gladly get acquainted, and with her relatives will try to make a pleasant impression on them. He is eager to take the relationship to the next level. A man interested in a short sexual encounter. He constantly comes up with some ridiculous excuses, preventing the reunion. And if his intentions are serious, he moves the relationship along. After meeting his parents, he offers to come over, and then he proposes. Vanessa finished and looked intently at her granddaughter. "How much is similar?" she remarked with surprise. "That's what I told you. So let's go, since we're invited. Besides, I can see you like him too. I don't understand him, but I can see he's got a good heart." "All right. Well, let's see the boss outside the office." The young woman laughed wickedly. The trip was indeed a pleasant surprise for them. On the road, Stephen made a lot of jokes. He was alert. Wendy liked the fact that he did not ignore her grandmother's wishes. It seemed to her that the chief became sympathetic to Vanessa. So, in casual conversation, they reached the place. Before their eyes spread out a huge natural park with powerful paths, with majestic towers, castles, fortresses, and shuttles between them, corridors and carts. The charioteer gave a few hundred and got to any object with a breeze. And in the center of the cultural site, on a high mountain, stood the majestic figure of a new serpent, which at the appointed time spewed out streams of fire. The travelers visited all the art objects they liked, had lunch in a stylized Korchevnikov's, admired the final exit of the old Russian dragon, bathed in the local river. In general, they were satisfied. Happy and tired, they went on their way back. Stephen was jubilant. Wendy had spent the whole day with him. She smiled, took him under her arm, and discussed her impressions. Vanessa, too, had made a favorable impression on him. He expected to see a decrepit old woman, but met a vigorous, neat woman. He could talk to her on any subject. With these two ladies, he felt at home freely and easily. He didn't even have to control his emotions or restrain his impulses. He too acted like a child and enjoyed the fabulous outing. In the late afternoon, Stephen delivered Wendy and her grandmother home and went to his own place. He was light and happy at heart. The man was content and caught himself thinking that he felt good about being able to give such a trip to the girl his heart desired. After this trip, their relationship began to develop rapidly. There was warmth, respect, and care. Stephen was thrilled to realize that Wendy also cared for him. It gave him so much energy that he felt as if he were not walking, but simply floating above the ground. Time passed, and gradually they grew closer and closer. And soon one remarkable incident occurred which enabled Stephen to be convinced of the correctness of his choice. When the city was covered with snowy winter and cold winds, forgot in its streets, he caught a bad cold, with a high fever and skinny chills gripping his entire body. At the height of the infection, he called Nancy and told her he would be gone for several days. The man's condition kept worsening, and soon he slipped into oblivion alone in the apartment, completely helpless. Stephen perceived the sounds of the television and telephone as if through a jenna of thick fog. He was no longer able to even stick a thermometer under his arm. The patient was losing touch with reality. The only one who sounded the alarm was Wendy. She convinced Nancy to give her a spare key to Stephen's apartment. It was kept in the study just in case. She rushed over to her boss's house. The girl was shocked by what she saw. She immediately called an ambulance, and Stephen was hospitalized. Wendy arrived at his apartment just in time, because the timely treatment helped him to avoid complications. According to the doctor, they were sure to threaten a man weakened by infection. Every day the girl visited the patient and made sure to bring fruit. And hello from Vanessa. Feeling her care and presence, Stephen recovered quickly. Soon he was discharged, although he spent another week at home. During this time, the man got so used to the closeness of his favorite girl that he did not want to part with her even for a while. He came to the realization that he would like to see Wendy as his wife. He needed her like air. On his return to the office, Stephen set to work with renewed vigor. He decided to propose to Wendy. The night before, the man left his office and approached her workplace. "Wendy, I need to discuss some work issues with you, but not in the office, but tonight at the Orpheus restaurant. I'd like you to be ready at 9 o'clock. I'll pick you up. Dress code. Parade objections will not be accepted." That's not a request. That's an instruction. Wendy was surprised at the way he spoke to her, but did not object. "It will be carried out to the best of my ability." "Not to worry," she replied theatrically, continuing to type on the keyboard. When they arrived at the restaurant, a table had already been set for them. Wendy had been with Stephen in various places before and was therefore surprised by the unusual service. In the middle she saw a beautiful vase with a voluminous flower arrangement. "You said it was a business occasion. Why flowers?" The girl was surprised. "And this you will find out later." "Mademoiselle," he slyly smiled. Then the wonderful voice of Paul McCartney was heard in one of the speakers. Stephen stretched out his hand to meet her and offered to dance. They twirled around the floor. Stephen gently embraced her and could not believe it was real. Sunny and warm vibes emanated from her. Wonderful hair spread across her shoulders. Her blue eyes glowed with happiness and her body gave out desires. The song ended. He gallantly led her to a table. Wendy sat down. "You know," Stephen began, "I'm frankly admiring you right now. I don't think there's a more beautiful woman in the world. I'll tell you the truth. You're probably the only woman I have any genuine respect for. You know everything about me. I'm no saint. Sometimes I've been ridiculous and stupid. Yes, I remember your indecent proposal." Wendy laughed. "And I remember what you were wearing at the hour of our first intimate date." Stephen smiled broadly. "But I'm grateful to your outfit for drawing my attention to you. But the time has come when you are not shy of me at all, and I want you to be my wife." He opened his palm with a dainty ring hidden in it. "Well, I'm a saint. All that remains is to ask Vanessa's blessing." Wendy raised her matchless cornflower eyes to him, and he saw in them so much love and tenderness that his heart leaped with happiness. "Can you imagine? I agree. Because from the very beginning I couldn't refuse any of your offers, even from indecent." The girl squinted slyly. "That's the effect you have on me. You could say, hypnotically. I am ready to sacrifice all my principles and morals. Vanessa has long ago figured you out. 6 months ago, and you charmed her from the first moment you met her. So I take it that's a complete agreement." "That's right. You, Stephen, understand. Give me your ring." Stephen complied with his beloved's request, and on this occasion they drank 2 bottles of champagne, then had a delicious dinner and several times twirled in a slow dance. Stephen remembered how unsophisticated Wendy used to be, and he desired her more than anything else in the world. Very delicately and carefully, he was teaching her to open herself up to passion. But it wasn't even about intimacy. Although their physical union was getting better and better each time, Stephen felt in Wendy an absolute kinsman. This beautiful girl had found a place for him in her soul. She was truly his other half. Stephen felt responsible for a woman for the first time and did not avoid her. He was ready to fight back hard for encroaching on his girlfriend's insecurities. No one in his presence would offend Wendy by word or deed. She was completely under his protection, and it was from her that the man felt a mental and physical togetherness that could only be dreamed of. How had this girl managed to win him over? He did not understand. What fascinated him was Wendy's sincerity and selflessness. She really gave Stephen the kind of attention and care that he had dreamed of as a child and received only from his father. Only now in this affair with Wendy, he realized that Prochor had managed to plant in him his best life principles. So he valued simple human values, mutual love, respect, sincere care for each other. A difficult childhood and frivolous youth pushed all this into the background and replaced it with phantom attachments. But neither success nor money could make Stephen happy. Only his relationship with Wendy had brought harmony and peace to his soul. Only now he realized what a pleasure it is to live in balance with himself, when not passions tear your soul, but tenderness and delight. They fill it all around. Nature, people, and everyday affairs become completely different. The very perception of the world changes. Stephen looked at her now with gratitude. Yes, it is not an easy world, and it is not simple, but it is what it is. When the fire of true love burns inside you, then philosophically perceive the difficulties and vicissitudes of life. Indulge in other people's shortcomings goes irritability, nervousness, using sometimes envy of other people's happiness. Stephen now realized how much good lurked in his soul, and there was no one to give it to. In fact, no one was taking it. And Wendy really needed his care, attention, and adoration. Her adoring gaze reflected her love for him. She must have sensed something real that had always been hidden in him. The girl trusted Stephen so infinitely that to deceive her, he could not deceive her. He realized clearly that Wendy was the cornerstone through which he had come to love life itself in all its incarnations. With her, he had discovered one immutable truth. He was giving himself to her and deriving great pleasure from it. Next to her, he became the real, the very sincere and desperate boy in whom his father had infinitely believed. The morning they met together in the large and bright bedroom, Stephen opened himself even more to Wendy. Putting his arms around her, he said, "You do not even realize how amazing you are, outwardly seemingly weak and fragile, but at heart strong and kind. You're the one who made me a better person. And that's not just a buzzword. It's the truth. I not only fell in love with a beautiful woman, but through you I became real. I got my self-respect back. Gone are the resentments, the fears. Through you, I've come to love the world. I have no complaints about it. It's given me such happiness. You have no idea how good it feels to be with you. I can't explain it to you, but I can show you." And he brought it to her lips in a passionate kiss. After a while, their private life became such that Stephen was breathtaking. For this, he was grateful to Wendy. She enjoyed learning all the intricacies of a close relationship between a man and a woman. Stephen sometimes became wildly frightened that he could pass it by. That and sobbing on the bench girls. He thanked God and fate that by some instinct he had seen the gorgeous woman hidden in this humble poor girl. Wendy had turned out to be a splendid wife. She was not afraid to quit her job and become a housewife, organizing everyday life and recreation for her beloved. Brought her great pleasure. The woman did not regret this step because one by one they had children, a healthy, strong boy, Rick with the same marvelous eyes, just like their mother's, and then a searing brunette with clear brown eyes, just like Daddy. They say girls who look like their fathers grow up happy, and vice versa. Boys who are lucky enough to inherit their mother's looks also become lucky. Stephen felt perfectly at home as a husband and father. He felt at ease, actively realized in the professional sphere, and was the main provider in the family. Even in his strict schedule, he was sure to allocate time to communicate with children when they grew up. On an equal footing with his wife, he attended parent-teacher conferences, participated in school life, took them to sections and additional classes. Vanessa lived to see his great-grandchildren and had time to nurse them. This kind woman passed away at the age of 90. Her soul departed peacefully to the kingdom of heaven in her sleep. During her lifetime, she refused to move in with the young and remained in her old home. Stephen did his best to make it more comfortable and sympathetic. He showed her respect to the end of the woman's life and considered her a kindred spirit. Thanks to his personal happiness, he was able to let go of his resentments toward his mother and remember the isolated moments of happiness she was able to give him. Celebrating the anniversary of their acquaintance, the Faber family recalled the incident of the indecent proposal and all the consequences that followed. A grateful heart now beat in Stephen's chest. He had grown to love the rain. One day, he came out of the office and realized that a downpour was about to break out. The scent was hard to describe. It smelled, especially of variety in foreign lands, and intensified with every minute. A lightning bolt flashed, like a flaming branch in a fire. It was followed by thunder. Droplets swiftly approached the ground and bombarded leaves, flowers, and grasses. Music was playing in my head. Stephen looked at the rain and saw a miracle. He admired how the raindrops gently touched the delicate greenery and tenderly, but washed away the flowers and hid in the thick grass. A heavy rain filled the street. It was in moderation, moving in rhythm and ringing. The August rain is young, and he cannot understand the wisdom of autumn. Men invite his youth and realized that he himself had entered the season of wise maturity. Stephen felt like raising his arms towards him and shouting to be heard. I'm a happy man. I feel crazy good. I love and am loved. Suddenly, the sky brightened, and the sun appeared from behind the clouds. Stephen, satisfied with the games of nature, and himself looked around and was pleased with the result. It seemed to him that the trees were younger and the flowers smelled sweeter. He looked up. The clouds were flying away, slowly turning into intricate shapes, and a bright star named the sun lit up. And we will wait for the pure world.
Subscribe and click the bell.
I took care of your disabled father for 10 years, and now that he is gone, he decided to get rid of me like a piece of junk. The woman's outrage was unparalleled. I gave up my favorite job, postponed the birth of our children, and all for your sake, so that you could continue to advance in your career, and you, scoundrel, found another. Not only that, but she has a child with you. Claire grabbed her purse and ran out of the apartment. Claire and Jordan had been married for 10 years. They met at a college party and never separated again. I'll pick you up tomorrow. The first night they met, Jordan said boldly, "Yeah, come by." Claire readily agreed. Every morning a whistle sounded under her window, followed by a not too loud whistle. "Claire, the carriage is here." Looking up to Claire's window on the 5th floor, Jordan was already standing below, with a briefcase under his armpit. Just then, Claire's black head, with its wavy curls, appeared in the open flame and her usual, now Jordan." 3 minutes later, Claire would jump out of the doorway, and the long Jordan would take another briefcase, a girl's briefcase, under her armpit. They returned from class together, too. 6 months of meetings were enough for them to realize that they were made for each other. "Where are you going? To the library?" Claire asked her cheerful classmate. "Yeah, you." "Are you going there, too?" And the young people walked together. "Shall we go to the movies?" suggested Jordan, and I was just dreaming of a new movie. Claire was excited. Movies, books, and music, they liked the same things, or almost the same things. Even in the student cafeteria, everything was resolved to the advantage of both of them. He loved the crumb of bread, she the crusts, and by ordering the vinaigrette, Claire always knew that the peas, which she couldn't stand, would be sparingly eaten by Jordan. "Just look at these misers. It's a natural plushkin with a box. They have every trip to the canteen so profitable." Their buddies laughed, pointing their fingers at the couple. Even with the current abundance of everything in the stores, it was not difficult. Christopher, his son and daughter-in-law, did all his errands perfectly. He was content, although he was very sad after the sudden death of his wife 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He had grown fond of the cheerful, troublesome daughter-in-law. "Claire, you look so much like Jordan, Mama," he told her often. "Just as troublesome and never angry. And my Betty, she was just as easygoing." Claire would rush to hug a sad Christopher. Come on now. Come on, it's all right, we're here." The elderly man tried to discreetly wipe away involuntary tears and soon got used to the lightning visits of Claire, who whirlwind carried around his small apartment, immediately put it in order. "Christopher," she shouted from his bedroom, "do you want that old shabby chair? Why don't we throw it away, and Jordan will bring you a new one tomorrow?" Christopher instantly forgot about the sadness and ran as hard as he could to save his favorite chair, as old and dilapidated as he was. Next time, as soon as her father-in-law's mood became sad, she again found something just as precious and frightened him with the expulsion of the precious object to the garbage. The father-in-law piously believed that his daughter-in-law's efforts were caused solely by her love of order and new things. He didn't realize how Claire was laughingly telling her husband in the evening, "Do you know how she scared Daddy today? He's sitting there looking at an old picture, you know. Remember your mom? Oh, him again. He was upset. You know, he loved Mom very much." "Yeah, I know." Claire stopped him. "I wanted to distract him. I frightened him with the chair that time, and today I threatened to throw away the antique clock, the one that doesn't work, and my father was so angry with me before I left. Young people nowadays don't understand anything about good things. Young people just want to spend money, and the chair will last 100 years. Oh, he can do that." He smiled at Jordan. "I can imagine how many hours he grumbled when you left." "Let him." Claire waved her hand lightly. "At least he didn't sit around crying and crying. A little stress improves his vitality, but dinner must have calmed him down," said Jordan, leaning back in his chair and stroking his stomach. "You've never cooked as good as you did tonight, Claire." Satisfied Claire smiled contentedly and immediately commanded, "I didn't cook for nothing. I was counting on your help. The dishes are yours. Get to the sink now, come on." Of course, it was purely symbolic labor, washing dishes after a delicious dinner, but my wife was pleased. She was spinning around, serving, then a fork, then a spoon, then wiping everything washed clean, and putting it in its place. Not work, but pure pleasure, the continuation of communication, all the more joyful that now the couple did not see each other during the day. Claire came home early from her work, so that she took care of her father-in-law more and more often. Everything flowed smoothly until one day Claire was interrupted from work by a call from Jordan. "Claire." He was almost shouting into the phone. "Dad's having a stroke. My neighbor Clara called me. She's already called an ambulance, but I can't leave. I have a meeting with the Chinese in 10 minutes, you know. I'll be right there. I'll be right there." Claire got right to the point. "I'm on my way. I'll call you later." And she was already rushing down the corridor to warn her superiors, putting on her coat and forgetting about her boots. And so she arrived at the hospital. Only getting out of the cab, she saw that she would have to walk through the puddles in her shoes. Confused, she stood by the car, not knowing where to go. "I'm sorry." The cab driver waved his hands. "You can't go any further. You see the barrier?" Claire looked at him uncomprehendingly and silently walked forward, looking for the main entrance with her eyes. She was in a hurry, as if something depended on her there, in the ward where Christopher was. Only at the emergency room did Claire realize that she would not be allowed into any room. Stroke patients were taken to the intensive care unit while it was still possible to prevent major complications from the stroke. There was no way anyone would be allowed in. The confused Claire, holding her coat in her hands, stood at the door to the intensive care unit for so long that the nurses and orderlies who ran by began to squint at her. Finally, one of them, touched by Claire's lost look, stopped and asked, "What are you waiting for, woman? We have Father here," and began to explain that she and her husband were at work, that they had been told about the intensive care unit, and that she didn't know what to do. What is the name of the patient?" With a brief nod, the nurse left, and soon the doctor, a tall, stern brunette, came out of the ward. "Well, who's here?" She said her father-in-law's name, although there was only one Claire in the hallway. Me, how is he?" "Is he alive?" Claire bailed. "He's alive if he's here." The doctor replied in a low voice, "What are you, his daughter?" "A daughter-in-law, but still a daughter." Claire said hurriedly, as if something depended on her words, "Your father suffered an ischemic stroke, and he's still in serious condition. Leave your phone number so I can contact you at any time." Could it get any worse? Claire was scared. Anything can happen in this life. The patient is stable. He's conscious. We need your phone number so that we can call you when we move him to a regular ward. He will need constant care. He is a bedridden patient. What do I need to do? What should I prepare? Claire was worried all over again. Here's a list of things to take with you to the hospital. The doctor pointed to a poster. Excuse me, I have a lot of work to do. Goodbye. Goodbye. A bewildered Claire lowered her arms, then suddenly realized, Oh, thank you very much, doctor. Have a good day. The doctor was already closing the door behind her, but Claire had time to see a long row of catalogs on which lay men and women. As far as Claire could make out, covered only by sheets, next to them, like cranes on long legs, were racks of IVs. Where are you, Christopher? She tried to look out for Claire, but the door slammed shut in a second, a click sounding. Claire was already on the phone, the worried husband. Claire, where are you? What have you got? Did you make it? The stream of questions seemed never-ending. Finally, Jordan stopped talking and Claire was able to answer. Yes, Jordan, I'm at the hospital. Christopher's in intensive care. They won't let me see him. He's in stable condition. I talked to the doctor, but Dad's conscious. What about him? Are you sure it's a stroke? Is there any hope he'll recover? I was worried on the other end of the line. Yes, as soon as the injections work and he feels better, he'll be moved to a room. I'll be right there. Wait for me, Claire. Stay there. Just where is it? She explained where it was and added, Only you can't go through the grounds. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance to the hospital courtyard on the square side. In 10 minutes, she was already sitting in a warm, cozy car and once again detailed everything again. And as soon as he is transferred to a regular ward, someone must be with him all the time because there is not enough staff to take care of every stroke patient. We don't know what condition he's in yet. For the time being, in any case, there will be bed rest, feeding, washing. The nannies can't manage it all. Claire, you realize I can't quit my job, right? I just signed a contract with the Chinese partners. I just need to be on site. Jordan was upset. Claire already realized what was about to come out of her husband's mouth. But this is the men's room. Jordan, how will I be there? I don't know. Jordan was confused. Why don't you call and find out? Do it in the morning, honey, and you'll do a better job. You've always been in touch with Daddy. You know roughly what he needs and how to treat him, don't you? When a sudden disaster strikes, people start looking for a way out. There is always someone they know who has already experienced the same or similar in their lives. So it happened with Claire. Coming to work in the morning, she saw the sympathetic looks of her colleagues, began to ask questions. Oh, Claire, how are you doing? How's your father-in-law? Alive, I hope. How are you? How's Christopher? The questions came one after another. All 5 women, sitting in the same office, had become friends and were aware of each other's family affairs. It turned out that the oldest of them, Doris, had once cared for a paralyzed aunt, and Lara, who had just joined the team, also had experience with her grandmother, who had suffered a stroke, but relatively mild. The first thing to do is to ask the doctor about painkillers, Doris stated. At first their pain is severe. It prevents them from starting exercises and workouts. Massage should be done lightly to relax the paralyzed side. Oh, girls, Claire begged. Thank you, but can I ask you to explain it all over again? Yes, of course, Doris and Lyra said almost in unison. I haven't seen him. I don't know anything about his condition. By the time I get there, I'll have forgotten everything you told me. Well, we're always in touch, Claire. Lara reassured her. They'll tell you everything. Every sick person is looked after by someone, a wife or a daughter. Yes, Claire was surprised. I was afraid it was a men's ward. Yes, it is now. Doris even laughed. Men don't go in such places, my dear. You have to save your strength, and it's a woman's job to clean up the dirt and carry the pots out. What's it to them, heroes? They won't trifle. They'll run away in half an hour. Claire was a little hurt by the woman's words, but they were true. At least Jordan could also take at least a week's vacation, so what if they were Chinese? Surely they are not more important than his own father. There was some truth in Doris's words. There was no escaping it. She called the hospital in the afternoon, and they reassured her that it was still a short time, but that the patient's condition was normal after such a blow. If everything goes according to plan, then tomorrow perhaps will be transferred to a regular ward. Having calmed down a little, Claire finished the day's work, but just in case she arranged for a vacation. The boss was understanding, but only asked her to warn the girls in the department. Claire, you always help your colleagues. Make sure that this time they are always ready to cover for you and keep the department on top of things. I will, Claire replied confidently. Our girls are great, they understand. She spent the whole day explaining things to Lara. It was supposed that she would substitute for those who had gone on vacation for the first time, which would be convenient for everyone, and at the same time she would get into the flow faster and learn different types of operations. At the same time, Claire, for some reason, could not get Doris' words about men out of her head. Walking home from work, through the quiet evening streets, she decided to put an end to this moving tangle of unpleasant feelings. At dinner at home, she looked straight into Jordan's eyes and asked, Jordan, you love your father, don't you? Why don't you at least try, yourself, to take a few days to be near him? He'd be glad. I'd love to. Jordan answered hotly, but as I explained to you, this is the time when things are going to get busy. If we miss the moment, someone without me will screw up, and then goodbye, foreign partners. Claire seemed to calm down. But you know, I'm actually sure that Dad will be quite comfortable with you, and that's important in his condition. Jordan continued as if, unlike Claire, he knew his father's condition much more than she did. Honey, you see we could hire a nurse, but she'd be a complete stranger, and I want Dad to be with just us. We. Claire was again struck by the inappropriateness of that pronoun after the sentences her husband had just uttered. Well, obviously, I can't be around him all the time. I have a job, but I'll stop by as often as I can to buy whatever he and you need. Please, Claire, will you do it? What's your job worth to you? It's a nerve-wracking job, and here you're busy and at home and everything. But I can't be torn between two houses. And who's going to feed you, clean the house, cook your things? Claire, really, I'm not without a hand, and I'm 2 years old. The woman, a little hesitated, agreed, and from the next day began her new duties. Christopher was indeed transferred to the ward the day after tomorrow. Having arrived with a large bag of what she considered necessary, Claire saw that her father-in-law was already lying on a high special bed. His eyes were closed, the skin on his face and hands glowing with dead poverty. A fat, small nurse showed Claire the duck, toilet, and bath, explained the daily routine in a businesslike manner, and fled. The 3 women who were here, some with their husbands, some with their brothers or sons, looked at Claire with curiosity and sympathy. The neighbors helped her identify things, getting to know each other little by little. Meanwhile, Christopher opened his eyes and wheezed something. He was begging for a drink. The neighbor realized. She immediately took the drinker and showed Claire how to handle it. Lifting the old man's head, she tried as carefully as possible to give him a drink, but the water poured past him. The father-in-law groaned unhappily. "Jordan?" He whispered, almost wheezed. "He's at work, Christopher." He'll come. He couldn't yet. He's got foreigners there." Claire reassured the old man. "Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, they both adjusted to life in the hospital. It wasn't easy. Christopher, who had always been characterized by intelligence and patience, suddenly became tearful, could get cranky. "No, I won't have porridge. I can't swallow it," and he would sharply push the plate away with his healthy hand. Fortunately, he was affected by the side of the brain that does not affect speech. Intelligence didn't seem to be affected either. Only by comparing her previous interactions with the man did she realize the damage the disease had done to a man she respected. She already knew there would be outbursts of anger, groans of muscle pain, and even delirium at night. The old man, in his position, no longer had to think about shyness, since her father-in-law could not support himself, and little by little he developed the kind of trusting relationship with Claire that only a child has with its mother or nanny. All of this Claire endured. 3 weeks of treatment in the nightmarish conditions of a city hospital, with poor provision, finally came to an end. Claire said goodbye to her kind neighbors, but then a new shift of patients and caregivers had partially entered the ward. Christopher, so cordial and polite before, barely looked at his neighbors in the ward. He was all wrapped up in the cocoon of his own illness. Claire, it was a good thing. The ward is calm, even if a little depressed, and there is a complete change in his and Christopher's life. "Jordan, I ordered a pass to the territory. You drive up, right to the entrance." In the tone of an expert dispatcher, the command was to her husband on the morning of their discharge. Jordan came to pick them up in a large, comfortable car. In his arms, he carried his father from the hospital gurney into the salon. At home in the apartment had to go up only to the 2nd floor. Now Claire was with her sick father-in-law. Just gradually Claire's life returned to normal. True, now she could not find a job in her specialty, but Jordan consoled her again. "Get some rest. You need it now. Look at the weight you've lost, Claire. Get strong. Do whatever you want. I'll make sure you don't deny yourself anything. Let's see what it's like to be a housewife." Claire smiled sadly. In her new position, she found a silver lining. She read a lot, watched movies, decorated her and Jordan's cozy apartment. It turned out that things at home never end. The more you do, the more new things arise. Even at her father-in-law's, constantly obeying the wishes of the sick, she was not so busy. Now, however, it was a very welcome, spiritualized business, the troubles and joy. Having completed a small renovation of her somewhat neglected, over the years, apartment, Claire was going to take care of her own health. The young woman decided to undergo an examination in the clinic and prepare for long-postponed motherhood. She had long dreamed of having children, and now her husband would have no excuses. Claire discovered that right next to their home, a new clinic opened, quite impressive looking. The flow of patients to this clinic did not expire, which inspired her faith in the reliability and professionalism of the doctors working there. She quickly found the clinic's website on the internet and called the number and made an appointment with the doctor. The doctor, by all accounts, was a good one. The walls of her offices in the paid clinic were full of all kinds of diplomas and diplomas. Having carefully examined Claire, the doctor said to her, "I rarely see healthy women, to tell you the truth. I don't see any health problems with you, so you can get dressed." Continuing to take notes, she pronounced, "Still, don't delay getting pregnant. After all, 32 years old, even by today's standards." "Actually, that's what we were planning," lied Claire, expressing her dream. "The longer you think about planning, the harder it will be for you to carry a baby. The clock is ticking," smiled the gynecologist. She thanked for the recommendations and left the doctor's office. At last she felt light and calm. After a rainy, cold summer, the weather was great, which is rare in August. It was even hot, and the coolness of the evening was so welcome. The maples glistened with green paws of leaves. The birch trees spread their long strands along the whole alley. It was a shame that such a lovely day would be wasted if it wasn't used for a walk, to breathe in as much fresh air as possible, filled with the fragrance of greenery and flowers. "God, it's beautiful!" Claire gasped. No way I will not sit in four walls." The young woman decided to go to Krister's apartment, which had been empty for about a year. It should have been cleaned up long ago. At least some of the unnecessary junk should have been thrown out. Some of the things left behind should have been taken away. From the stop, Claire went not straight ahead, but down the long path. Still unable to escape the gloom, the old apartment from the bright sunshine and clean air, the keys to her father-in-law's apartment, she carried with her, a long-standing habit. Opening the door, she took a step inside, but barely entered the hallway, she realized that the dwelling was quite habitable. At that very moment, much to her surprise, a 2-year-old boy came out of the room and stared at her with his little eyes. Just then, apparently his mother came out of the kitchen. She was an attractive woman who was clearly no more than 25 to 24 years old. "Who are you?" Claire asked in astonishment. "And what are you doing here?" "I'm Adriana. This is my son, Noah. We live here." The young woman didn't seem confused at all, but she wasn't surprised at Claire's arrival. "What right do you have to be here?" Claire was even more surprised. "This is my husband's apartment, Jordan, and who are you?" The stranger felt quite in her own right, standing firmly on her feet, and she wasn't going to answer to anyone, even if it was someone who opened the door with her own keys. Apparently, "I'm your husband's wife." She hummed stupidly and walked across the apartment without asking permission. Adriana, taking the baby in her arms, followed her everywhere. Claire found many changes in the familiar surroundings of the apartment. Christopher's bed was gone, replaced by a new, wide 4-poster bed. When Claire saw it, she wrinkled her nose. A sexodrome, and what kind of vulgar canopy over it? She was so disgusted to see the apparently shared bed of her husband and his mistress. And now what? Take up the knife, strike, as they say. The wardrobe in the bedroom was new, though inexpensive. Claire knew good things, but this was clearly an attempt to save money. Or had Adriana brought it from her possessions? It didn't matter at all. For some reason, however, Claire clung to every object, to the slightest change in the interior. She noted the beautiful mirror, set in a beautiful frame, and the expensive cosmetics in front of it, on the dressing table. The apartment was quite clean, but there was no sense of style and coziness created by women's hands. It was a little bit of everything. There were heavy purchases, Jordan, as if the furniture was brought directly from the house of Sobakevich. Nice, good value, insignificant trifles obviously belonged to Adriana, and also there was a lot of what was left from the previous owner, Kridster Hera, grounded and ageless. A bookcase with numerous books and albums, a fundamental desk in the hall, or a real wooden closet for clothes in the bedroom. Strangely, this diversity of everything, the diversity of the surroundings, made it easier for Claire to accept her husband's apparent, accomplished, and long-standing adultery. Everything around was so unstable, unfounded, that she simply let the fact pass through her, not taking it to heart, or it was the first fever, the body's defensive reaction to stress. Both women were silent. She walked around the apartment, sat on the couch in the living room. "Is that Jordan's son?" she finally asked, looking at the baby's cute face. "Yes," Adriana answered calmly and evenly. "How long have you been here?" Claire asked. "Since Jordan, we have been here for 5 years," Adriana answered. 5 years? Claire bit her lip. So by the time her husband cheated on her, she had already served 5 years as a sister of mercy under her father, and for the next 5 years, her husband had enjoyed spending time with this girl, was apparently happy with her. She felt either a chill or the sensation of being splashed with ice water. "He always told me to wait a while, that his wife was an invalid, and that's why he couldn't leave her. His wife needed constant care, and who would he be if he left her so helpless, couldn't part with her, pity her." "Oh, pity?" Claire didn't notice herself grinning ironically. "Where did you meet then?" "At my house," Adriana answered simply. "He kept promising me, saying he'd be free soon, and then we'd be together forever." "How long have you lived here?" For some reason, Claire asked. "It's almost a year since he finally moved me and my son into his apartment," answered the interlocutor still as calmly. "So I'm dead, and now there's nothing stopping you from being together." Claire sneered, unable to resist. "It would appear so. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't what Jordan said. I love him and I believed what he said." Without any embarrassment, Adriana said. For some reason she had decided that she could tell her husband's wife everything in detail, and that it was even necessary to do so. Serenely patting her son on the back, she looked peacefully at Claire with her small eyes, framed by absolutely cow's lashes, tastelessly augmented, in a medium-sized salon. And she kept talking as if to a friend, retelling the story of her acquaintance with Jordan. "I, myself, am a newcomer. I didn't pass the competition at the institute, so I studied to be a hairdresser. My mother said don't go back to the district, stay here. Her sister has been living here for a long time, my aunt. She's lonely, so she got attached to me. I clean her floors, help her bathe, give her groceries. She feels good. So my aunt tells me, 'You, Adriana, you better finish hairdressing courses and earn money like people.' Who need your institutes? That's right, I thought I'd go and learn. I grasped it on the fly, and now I'm working in a salon, men's hairdresser. Then again, Aunt Cindy made me do it." "You don't know anything, Adriana. You need to get married. And where does a decent man always go?" "At the barber shop." Adriana looked at Claire apprehensively and bit her tongue. But Claire didn't care about her. Slowly a bitter, soul-cutting truth began to creep in. She sits in a love nest and listens to the story of her husband's mistress. Could she have ever imagined such a thing? Yes, she couldn't have dreamed it. Simplicity is worse than stealing. Claire exhaled, looking at herself, and suddenly realized why she felt so bad. Until then, she had been sitting there without breathing, tense and tense. "What?" Perplexed asked Adriana, and without waiting for an answer continued. "Well, in general, since the hall is male, there are many men every day, but Jordan, he is not like all of them." She looked at Claire again and finally blushed. Claire saw her neck blush, then pink patterns appeared on her chest. Her whole face turned ugly red too. Claire tried not to look at her. She hated to listen. The revelations to her young rival. "Would you please call him from your number?" she asked, holding back as best she could. Adriana obediently dialed the number, and after a few seconds, Jordan's familiar voice sounded in the receiver. "Yes, Adriana, is something wrong?" Claire took the phone from her hands and spoke. "You're such a jerk, Claire." Jordan's voice sounded confused. "What are you doing in there? How could you? How could you?" "Claire, come home. I'll explain everything to you." Jordan, of course, could not say anything else at the moment. He was simply dumbfounded. "What can you explain to me? That while I was taking care of your sick father, you started a new family, lived a life of pleasure? You're a lowlife, a scumbag, a scum. Do you understand? And I don't want to see you ever." She shoved the phone into the hand of a stunned Adriana and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door. She walked away, tears streaming down her eyes. "Traitor, scoundrel, traitor." Claire mentally scolded her husband. "He has the child, and me. What about me?" Claire had always dreamed of having children from the very first days of her marriage, but she had never been able to get pregnant. Many times she would go to the doctor, but each time Jordan would talk her out of it. And then, while caring for a sick old man, thoughts of having a child of her own left Claire. There was no time for that. Still, in her heart, she hoped that she was not the one to blame for the couple's inability to give birth. Going to the doctor had made her so happy, she believed that all was not lost. But now she has and will have nothing, no family, no children, no job. No one needs her, no one at all, not even herself. If she knew why Jordan's passport had turned so brightly pink, something she hadn't and couldn't tell anyone about, perhaps Adriana's story would have dispelled her a little. Claire, by virtue of her good heart, would even feel a little sorry for this distant girl who had seen nothing good in life. Not distant, but Adriana had become wise beyond her years, and with good reason. Adriana never saw her father and never knew him. Her mother only waved away her daughter's inquiries like an annoying fly and drunkenly said, "Fuck him. Remember him." Adriana's mother was drinking. Not only that, it was absolutely indiscriminate on acquaintance, Galena. She had 3 children by different fathers, and laughing, she told one of her sons, "God knows, Ethan, from whom I gave birth to you, I lived with John, and James was next door, so he came by and mended the porch." And she laughed unabashedly. The daughter was still alone, and her mother seemed to love her more than her sons, called her Adriana, her daughter, and even occasionally bought her a new dress. Of course, when there was money from a drunken suitor, and that didn't happen very often. The Boyds would not be lost, her mother thought. The army and prison would not let them starve to death. The country needed men. On the outskirts of their village, almost in the middle of nowhere, stood only the high fences of the camp, and many kilometers farther away stood the same settlers' settlements where the released prisoners had settled down. Moors in the settlement were most cruel. The licentiousness of the former prisoners bordered on anarchy, and the hard work in the wilderness, where there is nothing to do but lumbering, left no strength for other pleasures than drinking and debauchery. As usual, 15-year-old Adriana was quickly used by one of her mother's friends, taking advantage of her simplicity and the absence of her mother. Then showed her a knife, not scaring her much. This Adriana was enough to keep quiet. And so they lived until the girl, with sinfulness, graduated from school. The mother's lover went to the girl as soon as the mother got drunk or went somewhere, even for a short time. Then Adriana was already surprised by the miracle. For 3 years she never got pregnant. Her mother's roommate was a relatively young and seemingly handsome man. Perhaps it was still trying on the girl with the position of his secret mistress. Sometimes in a good mood, he praised Adriana for dignity, incomparable with the appearance of the mother, who with every drink became a terrible, sprawled-across old woman. Knowing that her mother had a sister in a distant city, Adriana convinced her mother by crying and constant persuasion that she should go there. Her mother wrote a tearful letter to her sister, and her aunt agreed to take her niece in for the first time. The rest of Adriana's story, Claire, was almost true, except for the legend of the institute. What institute? For the uneducated daughter of an alcoholic? The school in the village gave knowledge that was only enough to live in the village. It is true that exiled intellectuals from the capital's universities used to work at this school and even trained a few medalists, but that was so long ago. And those who received these medals left the terrible land as quickly as their teachers, who had finished their term of exile. In short, Adriana had settled into the city quite well. Not bad at all, if you remember where she came from and who she was. Now she was in a pretty prestigious place, and she was going out of her way to please both the customers and the boss. "Come in, please." She stretched her lips in a welcoming way in front of Jordan, who came in for a haircut. "How shall we cut his hair?" "Well, it's up to you." Jordan smiled back. He was happy to see a new face. "You've studied, but I haven't. And you've probably studied more than I have." Adriana frowned modestly. "Engineer or professor?" Jordan laughed at the girl's unsophisticated compliment and asked, "And you are new. Where Claire?" Claire was the name of his regular hairdresser, of a very respectable weight and no less respectable age. "Yes, I've been hired to replace her on a trial basis, and they said I'd see what happens." Claire's retired. "Enough," she says. "Her legs have sprouted pillars by the chair. I'll dig in the vegetable garden and move to a country house. Except for onion shoots, I will not cut anything in my life. That's enough." Adriana laughed merrily. Jordan gave in to her fun and joined in. From the very first meeting, an extraordinary ease settled between them. Not for nothing, apparently, there is an opinion that love is chemistry. This gravitation of two, the desire to connect, and appeared in an instant, as soon as he saw Jordan Adriana. Without thinking, he wanted to see her again, to be closer to her. Then he realized that Adriana reminded him of the young Claire, the same mischievous eyes and dark curls. But that realization came much later, when he realized what a trap he had fallen into the moment he had decided to meet the young hairdresser after work. Adriana is so innocent and youthful, fresh as Jordan thought. Looking at her dark blonde curls and slender figure, she appeared to be very skillful in lovemaking. How was Jordan to know what and how the released prisoner had taught her 3 whole years in the settlement? Having arrived in the city, Adriana did not lead a monastic life either. Before entering the prestigious salon where she met Jordan, she had traveled the thorny path of an apprentice and was building up her hand, which it must be admitted she excelled at. She started out cutting and shaving men in a station barber shop, and what kind of people did not fall to her? One of the occasional customers, a smashing little guy who also came from the province, and settled in the city in the auto shop, captivated her heart and became a constant lover. Chuckling, he told her, "You catch the customer by the beard, do you hear? We'll catch a daddy with you, you and the pleasure of it will get. All I will be easier, and even more money from him to make money. And we with you in the summer on his money, and to the sea. You say too." Adriana sulked. "I love you alone. Do I need some daddy? Love me. Who won't let you, you fool?" Lover laughed happily. "And don't let your daddy out of your hands if you get him." And he strong hand rolls the girl on a joint bed. Recently, the couple began to rent a common room. It's economical and convenient. So about a date with Jordan, allegedly on her living space, Adriana lied without blinking an eye. In fact, having become close in an instant, she and Jordan made love right in Claire's apartment. Moreover, in her own bed, knowing that Claire, she would hardly have been able to have such a quiet conversation with Adriana for such a long time. But a decent person usually sees in another a person like herself, and it could not even occur to Claire how far human baseness could extend. After all, she came to her house only briefly while Christopher slept. Sometimes he was under the care of a nurse who, for a small fee, would visit the sick man to give him an IV of medication for support. The treatment lasted about an hour, and longer with a massage. Claire was on the run making dinner. Jordan cleaned up abandoned things, and not once did the thought of what was going on here without her at night creep up on her. Yes, her husband called her often, at each call asking what she and her father should bring. And also when, at what hour she would be, in their shared apartment, it didn't bother her at all. She didn't even pay attention to her husband's unusual meticulousness. On the contrary, it was pleasant his attention, waiting, counting the hours, "Let's go to my place. I want to treat you to a great coffee." Hiding his eyes, proposed Jordan, Adriana, for the first time, about a week after we met. It was already late evening, and they left the cozy cafe where they had spent several evenings. Kissing and cuddling in the car interior, a grown man and a blossoming woman, did not satisfy. Both wanted to continue. "And your wife?" Adriana was a little surprised. The rest didn't bother her. That was the way she was. "Wife, didn't I tell you?" Jordan was a little confused, although he had warned Adriana about being married right away. He would be honest with this nice girl. Adriana immediately made it clear that it was impossible to meet at her place, because she lived at her aunt's place, although perfectly continued to share a room together with her former lover. She intuitively felt what and when to say, when to smile, and when to open up to meet a man. Having acquired an urban appearance, the girl also learned the ability to behave discreetly. She could not be taught to deceive. She did it brilliantly. But to keep silent where necessary, to create an image of a well-bred, well-mannered maiden, this skill had to be learned as best as possible and preferably faster. Adriana was learning. She watched the men. They showed their feelings even more vividly than women. They turned out to be excellent teachers. Say the wrong thing, and the handsome guy would snap like the last skier. A chiseled guy could get a square swear if he got the wrong haircut. Compliment, affectionate smile, worked wonders. Knave men bought them like children. Barbershop became for Adriana a kind of institute of noble maidens. She could portray any gait, any smile, from a simple and naughty girl to a price-conscious beauty, expanded her art of reincarnation. Of course, these charms applied only to men, and any woman could immediately recognize Adriana in 5 minutes. But men were coming, and for 5-minute seduction, fuse, and talent, Adriana had enough. Fascinated by Adriana's youth, and the novelty of his own position, free, in love, Jordan, as if plowing in weightlessness, but had to decide what to do next. And so he decided. My wife is an invalid, he said, and after a satisfied look at the girl's surprised face, he continued, I periodically put her in the hospital to heal, but pity her, she is also a person. I could not praise myself. What a good boy. Now he wouldn't have to explain to Adriana why there were women's things in his apartment. At the same time, he made a deposit for future meetings with her. The base is a word. Adriana, not suspecting that decent-looking men, too, can lie, easily accepted his proposal and surprised Jordan, liberation and temperament, their first night together. The next day, the ardent lover could think of nothing else but another night, and Adriana again behaved with complete freedom, and he was easy and simple with her. And Claire, what of Claire? She hadn't bothered him in a long time. Talking only about diapers and medications and a new Bedsores mattress, anyone's feelings would fade, and he's a living man. He's a man, after all, a successful one, by the way. There was not a single decent acquaintance of his who did not have a permanent mistress, and now it was his turn, too. He could afford an expensive beauty, but he liked this cute hairdresser, although it would be better without this job in the service industry, of course. Somehow it is not prestigious. After a couple months of lovemaking, he decided that he didn't have to show Adriana to anyone, but if anything, he wouldn't be ashamed to pass with her. Acquaintances will only smack, looking at the lush forms of his girlfriend. But to confess that your mistress works in a beauty salon, haircuts, and shaves other men, it is somehow not comical. Adriana, you should quit that job, he said, resting after the raucous entertainment. Adriana lifted her dark head from his shoulder and looked into his eyes. When are we to be married? Jordan, strangely enough, was not ready for marriage with a live wife, so he took the conversation aside. Adriana, soon I'll rent you an apartment, so we'll be there. We'll see each other more easily and freely. And my wife, she's not a bad person, she suffers. Poor thing. I try to create all conditions for her, of course, but the disease, it progresses. I'd be an asshole if I left her now. You'd be the first to judge me, darling. And he rushed to kiss Adriana, showering her with compliments, and Adriana laughed again, forgetting her purpose. Adriana could wait a long time, but here she was not forced to do anything. After seeing Jordan off, she pulled the curtain on the window, a sign to her roommate that the entrance to her apartment was available. He had moved out immediately from the old small apartment to this one, rented for Adriana by Jordan, and the presence of men's things. Adriana easily explained to Jordan that her brother, a student, often visited her on weekends. She couldn't deny him a vacation and a full meal at her sister's house, could she? Jordan's free weekends suited him just fine, and he easily took on his brother's version of the story. His father and Claire were eagerly awaiting him on Saturday and Sunday, too. While Jordan was with his father, Claire would get at least a few hours of freedom to clean up, socialize with her friends, at least go to the sauna after all. It turned out that everything worked out marvelously well for everyone. Everything settled down. Adriana finally quit her job. Jordan gave her enough money to support her young lover, but he still decided to keep his job. 2 years into her relationship with Jordan, Adriana suddenly found herself pregnant. She thought that her body was now rested after the stress. She didn't have to live in constant tension, so she was able to conceive. Wow, a kinder was made. Her roommate laughed, neither surprised nor pleased. But you, Adriana, don't count on me. I'm a shitty father. I have such a kinder, probably all over the country is full of running. So come on, Make your daddy happy. He needs an heir. I was just on my way to a construction site. A friend of mine wants me to go. The man, very far from thinking about the family nest, quickly packed his things and drove off in an unknown direction. Most likely not that far away, just to avoid Adriana's eyes. The confused Adriana cried for a long time, abandoned by her constant lover, with whom she had long since gotten over. Jordan arrived, saw her swollen face, and rushed to embrace her. "Adriana, what are you doing? Who's hurt you?" "No one." Adriana sobbed. "I'm pregnant." "Oh, what a trouble you're in." Jordan laughed. "It's wonderful. You'll give birth to a beauty like you." Until now, Jordan had never suspected that the news that he would soon become a father would make him happy. For so many years, he had avoided persistent conversations with Claire about the future birth of a child. Why he had avoided parenthood, Jordan himself could not answer. Not ready, that would be the truth. And here he himself did not understand why, out of a desire to appease his mistress, the acceptance of this unknown infant was suddenly born. With every visit to Adriana, this acceptance grew stronger, and now he himself did not understand why he so desperately refused future fatherhood, living with Claire. Incidentally, it must be said that he continued to have a wonderful relationship with Claire. He showed touching care for his wife, but there had been no intimacy between them for a long time. Claire, a proud and self-sufficient woman, did not touch the subject out of delicacy. There was no need for tenderness. Christopher was dying. He was already 40 days old. Claire had long lived at home, and the couple continued to live as brother and sister. Returning from the gynecologist, Claire was just about to gather the mental strength to decide to have the most important conversation with her husband for the future of their family. It began to rain, but she, as if without noticing it, took among some half-abandoned cottages, not thinking at all about where she was going. The phone in her bag rang insistently, but she paid no attention to it. Only feeling deadly tired, the woman looked around, saw an old bench under a tree, sat down, leaned her head against the rough table, and closed her eyes. At that time, a white-haired little boy was running along the sidewalk, slapping on the puddles, enjoying the splashes that flew from under his bare feet. He tried to run exactly in the middle of the small puddles that had managed to form from the rain, and now they glistened under the light of the lantern. He squealed and laughed joyfully when the splashing water hit his face and carelessly licked the muddy drops off his lips. It was Adam, a 3-year-old little boy who had run away from his loving grandmother, and his great joy from an independent walk. There was no limit. "Adam, I'm in trouble with you," shouted the old lady, trying to catch up with her grandson and not keeping up with him. "Where are you going on the puddles? Stop. I say, you'll catch cold, and you'll have to take care of yourself. Oh, you are my bitter little sorrow." Finally, she managed to pick up the baby, but she immediately let him go, shrieking from the pain that shot through her lower back. She turned to look around for a bench, and only then saw a woman sitting on a bench under a tree. The old woman shuddered fearfully. "Lord, your power! What is it?" The little boy in his grandmother's arms also quieted down when he saw the stranger, and with some fear looked at the pale face of the sitting woman. "Is she alive?" The old woman muttered, slowly approaching the bench. Then she stepped toward Claire and touched her with her hand. "Whose are you going to be, girl? Why are you sitting out here in the rain? What's the matter with you?" Claire opened her eyes. "Don't worry, I'll be right out. I just got lost here by accident. Where would you go in this darkness?" The old woman looked around worriedly. "Well, let's go to my place. It's my house over there." Lifting Claire by the elbow, She continued to speak softly. I live with my grandson. Is my name Margaret? And this is Adam. The frightened boy looked out from behind Margaret's back. Claire followed the friendly old woman. She had no strength, and she would certainly not have made it home on her own. The place was remote. The phone was dead. There were no cars or cabs around. It was a completely unfamiliar suburb where she had never been in her life. Soon enough they came to an old 2-story house, probably from the time of the first builders. They went up to the 2nd floor and entered a small apartment. Margaret put the kettle on and took her grandson into the bathroom. I'll only be 5 minutes, darling, she said to Claire. Otherwise, God forbid he gets sick, I'll warm the child. She quickly bathed Adam in a hot bath and brought him to the kitchen. Now for some hot tea. After Adam, she also went to the bath and cleaned herself up. The hot shower made her feel better, and she was able to answer Margaret's questions. I, Margaret, learned a terrible thing today, she began quietly. I have no husband, no child, no family. Oh, no, the new acquaintance groaned. Are they dead? No, my husband is alive, even happy. He abandoned me, Margaret, and abandoned me a long time ago, and I was a fool. I lived quietly and trusted the scoundrel. Wanting to talk, the woman told about herself, not hiding any details from the old woman. Why did he do that? I did everything for him, loved, cared, and what happened? I took care of his father for 10 years, and during that time he betrayed me, cheated on me. How can you do that? And the most frustrating thing is that I'm 32 years old and I don't have children. I do not even imagine whether I can even think about men. I dream about a child. 10 years I lived next to my dying father-in-law, and I thought only about a baby. While I look for a new husband, my time will be up. Claire grinned bitterly and sipped the cooled tea. Renewing the brew, the women began the tea party anew. The hostess remembered the forgotten cutlets and warmed them for her new friend. You probably haven't eaten anything since this morning. Here, eat this. You'll feel better. Everything seems bad to a hungry person, but on a full stomach, it's no trouble at all. Claire only now remembered that in the morning before going to the doctor, she had not eaten anything, thinking that she would have to take tests. Poppy seed in her mouth since last night. She feels completely drained. At first through force, living through a juicy morsel, she gradually got into the flavor. The meat was fragrant with garlic and onions, and with hot tea, Claire ate 3 cutlets and turned a little pink. Margaret began to comfort Claire, and Adam and I, too, were left alone. There are not only men who are unfaithful, there are also enough butterflies among women that fly from flower to flower. They're all looking for the best and the sweetest. Did Adam's mom leave him? Claire guessed. She's beautiful. Why would she bother with a child? She'd rather spread her beauty around the world, live for herself. And that's how deceptive appearances can be, Claire. Was she really beautiful? She took an interest in this family. The son came. Mom, I'm getting married. Here's the bride. Well, I look at her. She looks like a daughter-in-law, a nice girl, lovely to look at. She's tall, straight, looks into the eyes, looks cheerful, and has curls. Now this miracle is made with her own hands, so she knows how to do something, also good. I guess you can't drink water off a face, of course, but my Harry is worth every beauty. It's not good for a mother to praise her child, but my son, he looks like a hero from a picture. He took after my father, and our father was a man to all men. It's all right that he's found a match. God willing, they'll get along happily. Get married. I say the young years are passing. Why grow old alone? Let's have a family. Together you'll look for what you want and build it. I blessed my son. We summoned the guests, celebrated honorably, everything as it should be. Right after the wedding, my daughter-in-law got pregnant and gave birth to Adam. And now, not like before, the little one needs diapers and food, not like nowadays. He doesn't suck a tit, and his food is very expensive, they say, so he started to run out of money. Margaret told how the money shortage started, how she tried to save money and diversify at least the food of the young. She got Piglet, worked from morning till evening on a small vegetable garden, made rolls so that the harvest would not go to waste. But of course it was not enough, and the young wife sat at home more, not helping with the household in any way. She always had an excuse. She had a stomachache. Adam did not let her sleep at night. Adam was capricious. Margaret put up with it too, as long as the child was looked after. But Harry would not spoil her mood because her son tries, works, takes overtime when he can. So we stretched as hard as we could, but we got tired. That's what I'm telling you, Claire. Harry came home from work one day and said he was leaving the workshops. Turns out a friend of his from the army had written him a letter. He didn't write often, but this was just in time. He's been on a business trip for a long time, and he calls Harry to him. He writes to us that we need such people very much. You're not a drinker, handy and ahead, all sorts of tasks, like nuts. He wants Harry to work with him, because his partner moved to the south and gave up business trips. He needs to be treated in the sea air, so my Harry has decided he's going to work on a rotational basis. What about your sister-in-law? Did she agree? Claire asked. How could she not? She loved money, that she will buy on joy. Everything. She liked to dress up a lot, but my grandson was dressed up like a Tsarevich. I kept scolding them. Don't spoil the boy like that. He doesn't understand anything yet, and they put new expensive clothes on him every day. They wash them, so he doesn't have time to put them on a second time, as everything is already too small. He grows by leaps and bounds, but life has gotten better, hasn't it? Claire either asked or confirmed. Oh, Claire, on the outside, everything is peaceful. Money seems to have improved, but what's inside a man, you can't see at once. The wife turned out to be a troublemaker. She strayed when Adam was not even a year old. I didn't say a word when I noticed the affair. Harry came to visit. We had a goodbye, he went away, but she's so fussy about it. She's been trying all sorts of ways to get out of the house to deceive me. And she attacked the wrong one. I waited for her until she came back late, smelling of wine. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes wandering. Come on, sister-in-law, I told her, sit down next to me and let's talk. Where have you been? Who were you out with? Don't lie to me. I've seen your sister. I'm a woman myself. I know at a glance who breeds what. Well, Claire got excited. So she sat down, her eyes down to the floor, playing the innocent, but she kept silent, and I kept silent. We were sitting like that, and suddenly she started crying. Excuse me, she's crying, Mommy. She called me Mom. She lost her mother long ago. And you? Interest, Claire in the lives of complete strangers, was growing. What about me? My business is old, I told her so. It's not me I'm telling you to live with, sweetheart. You have a husband. And if you think about it, you have a son too. Will you sit like that in front of them? How will you look into their eyes? She cried, and they went to bed. And I didn't sleep all night. I had no peace. And in the morning I fell asleep, so soundly that I didn't hear anything. Only when Adam woke up and began to grunt, I jumped up to him. I looked, and my sister-in-law's bed was empty, and the bed was tidied up neatly as before the guests. I looked in the closet, and there was not a single dress. All I immediately realized, she ran away with her boyfriend, unknown to what distant lands, and she did not take any money. Unless she had a separate amount with her, but I know nothing about that, but I do not have time to sit and cry. So I dressed up my grandson and fed him, took him for a walk and sang songs. That's all. Did you even write or call afterwards? Her only listener was worried. No, Claire, I waited. I think she is a mother, such a wonderful boy, how not to love and miss him. But no, not once, not a single word. So she hasn't been around since. She has, of course she has. You can't go far without money, and that man doesn't need her without money. My sister-in-law came back 2 weeks later. Harry hadn't even gotten back from his business trip yet. Adam and I are walking from the store with a heavy grocery bag in one hand and my grandson in the other, and near the entrance, Mother of God. My daughter-in-law is sitting there. Adam shouted, "Mom, Mom," but she and cry and hug my son. She almost falls on her knees in front of me again. There are a lot of unkind eyes around. Everyone is curious about what's going on in the neighborhood. But I picked up the bride and took her home. What to be ashamed in front of people? And she, poor thing, continues to wail about her misfortune. "What shall I do, Mother?" she says. "How can I go on? She won't forgive me, Harry, and neither will you." And Adam, he cuddled up to his mother, hugging her, saying his own things to her. And I felt sorry for the poor head. He grew up without a mother. Who would teach him life? A mother to a child, whatever she is. Don't make another orphan out of Adam. Let them raise their own child, if they've given birth. How could she? Claire was indignant. To abandon such a lovely boy. And that's my sweetheart. She must have been a breed. She'd live like a human being, and then she'd do something nasty. So we agreed that we wouldn't say anything to Harry, and we'd start our lives all over again, as if she'd never done anything wrong. It's not uncommon for young people to have disagreements and quarrels between husband and wife, but as they embrace and sleep in the same bed for a night, all the past will be forgotten and there will be peace and tranquility in the house again. Didn't it work out that way for them? Claire asked. I don't know. Harry was making good money. I tried to help everyone. Kelly, that's my daughter-in-law, tried not to spend too much money, so they decided to separate. At least a little, but to have their own place. They moved from me to a one-room apartment, and to pay for it took, as it is called now, a big loan for housing exactly. A mortgage? That's what Claire said. That's the one. Margaret rejoiced, a forgotten word. They live on their own. And what about me? My eyes can't see, my ears can't hear what's going on between them. Whether we lovebirds live amicably, but only in peace, I have not known since then. I wondered if Kelly would bear it, if she'd keep her temper, or if she'd go back to her old ways. She didn't hold back, so she went out again. Claire said yes to Paula. She has. Maybe she inherited it from her parents, but she had a nature that couldn't be overcome. Was my son worth it, to change him for swindlers? He doesn't drink, he can't stand it. Well, he smokes. It's a hard job. He's used to it. He's never tried tobacco before. He's not a bad character. He doesn't pick on little things. He does everything for the house, everything with a smile. Kelly sleeps in the morning and won't go to the baby. I boil sometimes. It's not a good thing for a grown woman to lie in bed until noon, until the sun starts to blaze up her ass, but Harry just smiles. Let her sleep, Mama. She never slept so sweet as she did at your place. How did she do it in her apartment? Claire wondered. I suppose she did. I've only been there a couple of times, and then I've come with my own hotels. She said, "Oh, Mama, how delicious! What pies you bake!" She praises them, but she puts store-bought sausage and cheese on the table. I found out later that she started treating Harry badly, too. She'd disappear for a night or two, and he wouldn't say a word, wouldn't bother me. That's when I wished I'd warned him. Watch your wife, she's not averse to running off to the left. And then Kelly, our dear Kelly, she started drinking. One day she went to the store and did not return, but now she left with money, all that was at home, earned by her husband, took with her. She will come back, come to her senses and come back. How can she leave her son? Margaret comforted Claire. "No, honey, she's not coming back. She's dead. She had an accident." Claire, who had not expected such an outcome, covered her mouth with her hand in fright. Margaret continued her sad story. She was traveling with a man, and they died together, whether it was her half-lover or another unknown. I don't know the details. Harry told me all about it. She sold their apartment together, too, as it turned out. How could she do that? It's a complicated process. Everyone who lives in the apartment has to participate in it. Claire was once again surprised. And they also have a minor child. His share is not allowed to be sold in any case. The guardianship authorities monitor it, because he is defenseless, Adam, and should not remain without registration and without housing. Claire was aware of a lot of the legal laws by nature of her job, so she sold it to some crooks. There's all these black whatchamacallits nowadays. Black realtors? That's what Claire said. Yeah, that's what her half-lover set her up with, and got Kelly to do the paperwork. They got a law against the law. They'll get around anything. They say they even kill people for housing if they get a lonely person who nobody asks if they're alive. And then what? Claire was already looking forward to the denouement. Then she ran away, collected all the coins and ran. The money's been squandered. So Harry came to me with Adam, asked me to look after him. He said I had a contract to finish my work. I let him go. I'm looking after my grandson myself, but it's getting harder and harder every day. While the women were talking in the kitchen, Adam fell asleep. Claire helped her carry the boy to his crib, and then she and Margaret cleared the table. She washed the dishes, and as she fell asleep, she was surprised to think that she hadn't thought of her husband at all for hours. In the morning after breakfast, she thanked the old woman for everything. "Margaret, you saved me. I had no one to turn to talk to, and here you are. God brought me to you." "Come on, my dear," the old woman said. "If it wasn't for me, who else would have found someone else? A man in the world will not be lost. You just don't sit alone. Close yourself. Come out of your resentment." She kissed Adam on his fair head and hugged his grandmother and went home. Promised to come back soon. She really did want to get back to those two as soon as possible, to help as much as she could with them. She didn't want to go home, but there was nowhere to go. She had to solve an unexpected and despicable situation, which was created by the husband she loved before. The husband turned out not to be full of peers at all, as it would have been good if he had spared the woman from finding out about the relationship. Remembering that the best defense is offense, Jordan from the first minute took the form of insulted virtue. He met his wife with indignant words. "Where have you been, Claire?" Saying God knows what to me on the phone, throwing me off my rhythm. "You're sleeping at God knows whose house." Oh, Claire grinned, no longer surprised by Jordan's insolence. "You're out of rhythm, aren't you? And I thought you had already learned to sit on two chairs, to maneuver between two families? Well, I haven't succeeded yet." She saw that Jordan had lost a little of the high ground from which he had intended to speak to her. He shrank back and lowered his head. "Claire," He spoke in a different way. "You have to understand, there's a child in there." I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't going to have an affair on the side, but I couldn't take it. Claire looked at him straight on. "You couldn't stand the lonely idleness while I was courting your father, could you? You wanted a young body, a free relationship. Well, good for you. You're doing great. It's not like that. You're overplaying your hand. I resented you. I'm a man. I need to feel supported and cared for. And I'm a woman, so I don't need anything at all, do I?" Claire was beginning to boil. "You haven't spent a single night with my father. Not once have you offered to help me with the nurse. And I'm a young woman, too. Men still look at me, by the way, even though I've dried up and aged over the years." Jordan had nothing to say, and she was getting more and more atomized. "Do you realize what it means to spend years after a sick old man? How many times I got up to my father every night. How hard it was for me to lift him, to wash him. How I withered without society, without girlfriends. I have none left." Claire cried. They both could not remember how they had been as young people, loving each other and full of life plans. Jordan felt a grudging estrangement from his wife, forgetting everything she had sacrificed so that he could pursue his career in peace. Claire was thrown into shock by Jordan's betrayal. She simply couldn't imagine how he could have gotten to such a point of hypocrisy, though she could now recall many episodes she hadn't paid attention to. Some suspicious or inappropriate words of his, letting them pass her ears. "You're selfish." Blamed her own self after all, Jordan. "You've always been preoccupied only with yourself, with your own needs. Your long lists, your demands, the grocery lists I fed your father, demanding a nurse or a doctor to visit Christopher at home." Claire was no longer able to be indignant. She looked at her husband's flushed, aroused face and couldn't understand how her beloved Jordan could hide in the body, this fat, lustful male, thinking only of himself. What had to happen for a man to change so much? After all, Jordan's mother and father were deeply decent people. A lot of things made sense now. They had lived apart for a long time. Except for Christopher, they had nothing left to bind them together. You wouldn't think of a shared living space as a bond, but as the fruit of a marriage. Yes, and this apartment, for 10 years, became not cozy, abandoned, although they tried to bring it to a more decent form. With the salary that Jordan received, they could have long ago bought a more spacious home to equip it according to the latest fashion, hire a designer and excellent craftsman, but she had no strength, and he had no desire to somehow strengthen the household, and thus the family. And now she is alone at a broken trough. This does not scare her at all. The protective power of the body does not give Claire despair and think about the future. She needs to urgently cut this knot of feelings that has been tormenting her for more than 24 hours, because it is unbearable. Enough. Powerfully, she interrupted Jordan, who was already carrying something completely obscene, purposely atomizing himself. She only heard the words about her infertility, but she didn't care anymore. "Pack your things and leave. You have your own apartment now. You have a wife and a son. Go. I can't promise to die, but you'll finally be Adriana forever. I'll file for divorce tomorrow." "I will," answered the confused Jordan. He did not expect such a quick resolution of the case. Taking the big bag, he slammed the door. Claire only grinned again, noting, "Prepared, packed the bag in advance." 2 months passed, and Claire became a frequent visitor to Margaret and Adam. She did all the housework, looked after the boy and his grandmother, and became very attached to them. She didn't want to stay in her own apartment. First of all, she had gotten used to it over the years. Secondly, she felt stuffy there. Memories came into her head, plunging her again and again into a maelstrom of bad moods and depression. She would only leave for her place in the evening, but in the morning she would deal with the divorce proceedings, grab a bite to eat somewhere on the beach, and wander around the city until she was exhausted. The weather for Claire was now good for anything. She treasured every hour of freedom and the opportunity to enjoy nature and the cityscape. One evening, when Claire was about to go to bed, the phone rang. It was Margaret. The old woman's voice sounded muffled and painful. "Claire, I'm not feeling well. I've called an ambulance. Come to Adam, for God's sake. He'll be alone if they take me away." Claire called a cab and rushed to the boy, taking some of the groceries she had at home. Half an hour later, she was already there. She saw an ambulance at a familiar entrance. Worried, she ran up to the second floor. The doctor had just examined the patient and was washing his hands. "Doctor, what's wrong with her?" Claire asked. "You see, it needs a full examination." The doctor answered evasively. "Her condition is moderately serious. She needs rest. We will take her to the hospital, and the main treatment will be prescribed after the final diagnosis." From that day on, Claire's worries increased. Now she visited the old woman in the hospital, brought her home-cooked food, and comforted her, promising that everything would be all right. Adam never let go of Claire's hand, and Margaret thanked God that she had someone to leave her beloved grandson to. One evening, Claire was putting Adam to bed. She read him a book, laid him on his side, covered him with a blanket, and began to hum a little song. Suddenly he looked over her head and jumped out of bed screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" Claire turned and stood in the doorway with a surprised face. A tall, handsome man froze and looked at her without understanding anything. Then he picked up his son in his arms, kissed him, and asked, "Adam, who is this?" The boy took his father's face in his palms, looked into his eyes, and with complete seriousness whispered, "This is my mother, only it's a secret." The little boy didn't want to let go of his father. "Adam, but Daddy drove a long time, then flew on an airplane. He is very tired and hungry." Claire explained, "All right, feed him." Reluctantly, he let go of his father's hand. "Dad, will you come to sleep at my place?" "Of course, son," the father promised fervently. As always, that's why he was coming. Claire put the boy to bed again and closed the door and went into the kitchen. Quickly warming up the food, she set the table and sat down across from Harry. "I'll feed you for real in the morning, but for now there's nothing else to eat. I'm sure it's a nice dinner after a working canteen." Harry smiled and began to chow down on the soup. Over tea, Claire couldn't help herself. "I know a lot about you, Harry. Your mother told me." The man looked seriously into her eyes. "Well, that's good. I hope to get to know you better, too." 2 years had passed since Harry had discovered Claire in his house. They were married and quite happy. A few months ago, they had moved into the house Harry had bought, a large, spacious house with plenty of room for everyone. Margaret couldn't get enough of her daughter-in-law and kept telling her son that she had found him such a good wife. Adam had long ago called Claire Mama, and she was genuinely happy about it, gifting the boy with unspent maternal love. She was picking out an ice cream cone near the summer kiosk when a man's voice called out to her. Turning around, she saw Jordan. She recognized her ex-husband immediately, but was struck by the change in his appearance. Jordan had grown old and flabby. His stomach hung over the strap of his pants, and he looked untidy and unkempt. "Hello, Claire." Jordan came very close to her and wanted to reach out his hand or hug her, but when he ran into his ex-wife's gaze, he got embarrassed and lowered his hands. "Hello." Claire answered not so much coldly as indifferently. She was deeply indifferent to this strange man, and the meeting did not please her at all. "How are you?" Jordan asked, looking the woman over from head to toe. It was the same old Claire, young, slender, and beautiful. Only better then? Probably over the years, she had gained self-confidence, the kind of confidence that only loving and beloved women have. Jordan did not know how to analyze, but he felt this confidence at once, and with a cold heart, he reached out to his ex-wife. "Good, and you, I see, not too much?" Claire inquired, unable to hide her dislike. "Yes, I'm divorced." Jordan waved his hands in different directions, as if confessing his helplessness. Though Claire didn't ask him any questions, he began to tell her in a hurry. "Adriana, she lied to me. It turned out she didn't have a child with me. I spent 5 years raising someone else's boy. Do you understand, Claire?" He looked at Claire again, as if complaining of injustice and asking for protection. "Well, what can we do? It's not the child's fault," Claire said, and then she made up with her ex and went to him. Just left a note on the table. Some people don't leave notes. Claire grinned bitterly, remembering her past experiences. However, now everything was almost forgotten, and she didn't want to remember, not to have anything to do with her ex-husband, not even to stand next to him. It was unpleasant for her. She looked away impatiently, waiting for Jordan to make way for her. "Claire, I'm so sorry to you. You know, I miss you so much. Why don't we try to start over? You love me, and I love you. You're too late, Jordan. With your love, I don't need it now." Claire turned away to make herself comfortable, to grab the ice cream bag and walk away, but he grabbed her arm. "Claire, I'm alone, all alone. I won't make the same mistake I made last time, and you're alone too, so why don't we get together? You're childless. Who needs you but me?" "No, I'm not childless." Claire grinned contemptuously. "But that's none of your business." With her head held high, she strode past Jordan while he continued to stare after her. The man saw a tall, handsome man approach the woman. He held the hand of a blonde-haired boy, about 5 years old, and on his neck sat a little girl with dark curls on her head, diligently eating cotton candy. The happy family went on their way. Jordan stood and looked after them for a long time, thinking that he himself had given his happiness to this stranger.